Chapter 422. What would happen once a lowly person who had always been ignored gained power? Just look at Akar Kai Sua's boastful manner. This idiot fully embodied the ugliness of human nature and what it meant to be a petty person intoxicated by success. Zhang Qing finally managed to watch his clown-like performance patiently and then left Bryn Sanders' airspace. He left him at the entrance of the magic crystal tower and disappeared from everyone's sight under the cover of the hills. Perhaps many people now believe that Akar Kai Sua would definitely be able to sweep through the northern lands and become the supreme ruler here with the support of the magical crystal shards and the endless army of monsters. However, he knew very well what would happen next. When the sun set, the dark elf ranger Drizzt would begin to summon Axelthew and use the special ability of the magic curved dagger Icing Death to expel this powerful Baylor from the material world. Having lost the help of the cunning demon, Akar Kai Sua would soon fully expose his short-sightedness and stupidity. Under his control, the powerful magical crystal shards were actually defeated by a bag of flour. This was probably the most humiliating defeat of Clenzinabin's countless failures. Of course, the price was that Akar Kai Sua would be abandoned by the magical crystal shards and once again become a lowly mage apprentice. What Zhang Cheng wanted to do was to ensure that this history that was originally destined to happen would proceed on its normal path, and when the magical crystal shards became ownerless, he would seize the opportunity to take them into his pocket. Due to the influence of Nisario's tear, the whispers of the ancient gods were echoing in his mind at this moment, along with thoughts of slaughter and destruction. Thus, he was not worried that this evil divine weapon would reject him. After all, the moment Clinchinian was born, it was set to be a powerful creature that obeyed the ultimate evil and pure chaos. Even though it had relatively high intelligence, it would never be able to gain independence and could only rely on other intelligent life to display its strength. While the magical crystal shards often preferred to control those with weak wills, it did not reject serving powerful and evil dragons and demons, especially when it could not find a suitable candidate. In the evening, when the last rays of the sun gradually disappeared from the horizon, Drizzt Chalden finally found a hidden canyon behind a cliff and prepared to use it as a place to summon Axelthew. The main reason he chose this place was that half of the entire area was covered by the arc formed by the cliff. With the Baylor's huge body, it could not move freely and could not display its advantage of flight. Apart from that, this place was behind the high cliff, so even if one stood at the top of the magic crystal tower, they could not see what was happening here. It had to be said that as a ranger, he was good at observing and making use of the terrain to the fullest. But this was not the end. The dark elf ranger took his dagger and carefully carved rung runes along the cliff and the ground of the summoning ritual. At the same time, the runes of the runes to protect him. But protection was better than no protection. After he finished carving the last rune, he took out a small statue from his bag and placed it in the middle, calling out in a low voice, "Guan Haifa." Soon, a black panther emitting a magical aura jumped out from another world. Its two sharp eyes looked around, as if looking for traces of an enemy. "Come here." Drizzt waved at the cat. He knew he was pressed for time, so he did not explain anything. He only wanted his companion to test the protection of the runes. The Black Panther did not hesitate, immediately obeying its master's orders and advancing with graceful steps. But before it could take 2 steps, it immediately hit an invisible wall. It stopped and let out a low growl full of confusion. Just as it tried to concentrate all its strength to break through this weak barrier, Drizzt immediately raised his hand to stop it. "Enough. That's enough, my friend. You've done well. I've gotten the answer I want." However, neither man nor panther noticed that in a corner not far away, there was a pair of eyes hidden in the darkness, silently observing them. Soon, the dark elf, who thought he was fully prepared, began to summon a demon. Coincidentally, Axelthew was staying in the magic crystal tower, angrily watching Akar Kai Sua play with the human girl who had lost her mind. This idiotic wizard apprentice had messed up almost everything he did in the afternoon. Due to the excessive waste of energy, 2 of the 3 magic crystal towers had completely collapsed and turned into a pile of worthless debris. As for his suggestion to break the magic crystals, this fellow with an extremely fragile ego had taken it as a sign of some kind of power grab and had been rejected mercilessly. If not for the fact that Clint Sinian had not completely abandoned him, the demon from the invincible abyss would definitely have torn Akar Kai Saw to shreds and tortured his pathetic soul for 1,000 years. That was why Axel Few did not resist when he heard someone summon him. Instead, he happily left the magic crystal tower and crossed the plains to the north, intending to use the summoner to vent the anger in his heart. When it retracted its wings and landed on the low hill behind Kane's giant cone, Zhang Cheng, who had been hiding in the dark for a long time, had a sneer on his face. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Now that the necessary actors are finally here, let me reveal the so-called fate to you." As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly took out the Soul Reaper from the magic backpack he carried with him. His black pupils flickered with the light of chaos and destruction. "HM, how did you become like this?" The magic sword had undoubtedly sensed the change in its wielder, and its tone was full of seriousness and vigilance. "What? Isn't this what you want me to become?" Zhang Cheng asked expressionlessly. "No, you're wrong. Although I wish to become one of the evil, I don't wish for it to be like this. Your soul is currently being invaded by an external force. It's constantly affecting your thoughts." And before the Soul Reaper could finish speaking, Zhang Cheng rudely interrupted. "Enough. I'm well aware of my own condition. I don't need you to remind me. You only need to fulfill your promise. Tell me what is true power, and what are the secrets hidden under the layers of veils?" "I refuse. I won't tell you anything before you regain your clarity of mind. However, I can remind you that a part of the truth you're searching for is hidden in an unknown corner of this world. Go search for it. Go explore it. Perhaps you'll lose yourself in the process and be completely consumed by madness and destruction. Perhaps you'll slowly regain your rationality. No matter what, I'll look forward to seeing your final changes." Chapter 423. After a short conversation with the Soul Hunter, Zhang Cheng quickly forced himself to calm down. He followed the cliff and quietly approached the demon's location. As a person with a strong sense of pride, he never believed in things like luck and fate. Thus, even if he knew what was going to happen next, he couldn't help but add a layer of insurance and complete his crazy plan. After all, Axel Few's identity was a bailer at the top of the food chain in the abyss. Above him were either abyssal lords, great lords, or evil gods that lived in the abyss and built their own divine kingdoms. Perhaps many people did not understand the significance of a flame bailer, but Zhang Cheng knew very well that most dragons in their prime or old age in the Pharaon continent would not be a match for a flame bailer. Moreover, Driss was only a ranger. Other than his outstanding dual-wielding skills, the only other thing he had was probably the Dark Elf's innate resistant skin. Normally, a bailer wouldn't need much effort to kill him. A high-level spell, firestorm, or internal explosion would be enough. Unfortunately, Axel Few had underestimated his opponent. Just as Zhang Cheng was less than 25 meters away from his target, he immediately heard a mocking voice filled with malice. What an unusual choice for a dark elf. I bet that if your god Empress Lolth knew about this, she would definitely be very unhappy. As soon as he finished speaking, a flaming whip and a serrated sword appeared in the demon's hands out of thin air. Obviously, these two magic weapons were the standard weapons of the Bailer demons, especially the famous beheading sword, which had a high chance of ignoring defense and directly cutting off the enemy's head. Even the Heaven Realm God's servant and the giant dragon were no exception. It could be said that it was infamous. At the same time, a white unicorn artifact carved from a fish bone slowly floated up from the dark elf's neck. It was obvious that this was the emblem of the goddess of the forest, Marikai, that exposed his true identity. The reason was simple. No traditional dark elf would believe in the goddess of the forest. Under the cruel rule of the queen of spiders, Lorsi, even the other dark elf gods could only hide in her shadow and struggle at death's door, much less the gods of the outside world. Thus, If a dark elf were to wear the emblem of another god, it would be tantamount to betraying their own race. They would be exiles through and through. Perhaps the abyssal demons were in awe of the dark elves' powerful magic power and cruel and cunning nature, but they definitely wouldn't take a mere exile seriously. "Tell me, who are you?" Axel Thew cracked open his mouth and asked in an amused tone. He had come to know many dark elves in the past few hundred years, but none of them had abandoned their cold and cruel nature and prostrated themselves at the feet of a kind god. It was this unusualness that aroused the demon's subconscious curiosity. "I am Driz Duerden, and it is true, but I turned my back on my family and became a loyal follower of Goddess Marikai. I must defeat you and completely banish you from the material world." After saying that, the dark elf slowly drew two curved blades, prepared to fight to the death. Perhaps he had many lies to get himself out of this predicament, but regrettably, in this world, no one would slander their own faith and guardian. "Ha ha 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 ha! What did I just hear? You want to kill me?" Axel Thew seemed to have heard an amusing joke and began to laugh without restraint. Following his ear-piercing laughter, his body began to emit raging flames, the bright light so piercing that it was hard to open one's eyes. He then slowly raised his executioner's sword. Even though Drizzt couldn't see his opponent's movements clearly due to the illumination of the flames, his rich battle experience allowed him to sense something and quickly begin to move. However, before he could make any defensive moves, he discovered that the demon had suddenly taken a step to the side and let out a furious roar. "Scram! You damn beast! I will tear you to shreds." The Black Panther that had been hiding in the corner for a long time finally leapt out and bit down on the demon's thick arm, forcefully dragging the demon that was several times larger than itself to the ground. However, Axel Thew wasn't to be trifled with. He immediately used his whip to coil around the dark elf's legs, causing both of them to lose their balance and fall to the ground. Just when Drizzt believed that he would be burned alive by the fiery whip, he suddenly discovered something interesting. The flames at the end of the whip had disappeared without any warning. Additionally, the flames emitting from the fiend's body had also inexplicably shrunk back for some reason, as if afraid of something. Soon after, he realized that the scimitar in one of his hands was giving off a cold feeling. Every time the scimitar passed by, the flames would quickly disappear. After understanding this, the Dark Elf Ranger didn't hesitate and immediately swung his weapon at the demon's right leg. Asterisk puff. Asterisk instantly. Asterisk Axel Thew's skin, which could withstand sharp steel blades, began to sizzle and emit large amounts of white smoke, as if he had met his nemesis. "Bastard! How dare you!" With a frenzied roar, the demon endured the pain and opened his mouth to chant a complicated incantation. The moment the second blade came, he quickly raised his finger and shouted, "Command! Intimidate!" Asterisk buzz. Asterisk whether it was Drizzt or his most trusted battle partner, the Black Panther, they were all rooted to the ground by the powerful magic, unable to move. "Die, Dark Elf!" Axel Thew struggled to get up, raising his sword to decapitate this dangerous enemy who had almost killed him. However, the moment the great sword fell, a large shadow suddenly appeared in the darkness. The next second, asterisk boom, asterisk a dragon's claw descended from the sky and pressed the demon firmly to the ground. There is no need to ask to know that Zhang Cheng, who had been hiding for a long time, had finally made his move. He completely ignored Axel Thew's roars and curses, only minding his own business as he used the small claws on his wings to grab the magical sword and cut open a wound in his chest so deep that his bones could be seen. One could even see the large beating heart in his chest. After doing all this, he spoke to the demon with a crazed expression. "You should feel honored, my friend. Tonight, you will help me complete a grand experiment, an ultimate topic regarding the evolution of life. What will happen when a demon and a dragon are perfectly combined? Just imagining it is exciting, isn't it?" With that last word, Zhang Cheng crushed the potion bottle in his mouth and allowed the strange dark purple liquid to flow into his stomach. He then twisted Axel Thew's arms and legs and stuffed them into the large wound in his chest. No, no, let me go, you damned lunatic. Chapter 4:24. The wise ones had once said that there was a wild beast hiding in the depths of everyone's heart. However, most people would use all sorts of shackles to lock this beast in a cage. However, once the cage was broken, the madness that would erupt would destroy everything. Zhang Cheng had always thought that this saying was exaggerated, but now he suddenly realized that there was nothing wrong with it. From a certain point of view, he had already broken a cage. Under the effects of Nesario's tear, he had completely abandoned his so-called rationality and began to try things that he had been extremely wary of. For example, consuming an extremely unstable evolution potion or devouring a Baylor from the bottomless abyss. In any case, he, who had been constantly enduring the whispers of the ancient gods, no longer cared what he would become. He was already crazy enough, so it did not matter if he became even crazier. Soon, under the effects of the powerful evolution potion, tentacles connected to the central nervous system grew out of thin air. One by one, they pierced into Axel Thew's eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and finally into the poor fellow's brain, where they began to continuously inject a translucent silver liquid. In less than a few minutes, Axel Thew slowly gave up resisting, as if he had fallen into a deep coma. After a while, the wound on his chest gradually healed. Only the tip of his horn was left outside. Without a doubt, this powerful Baylor had become Zhang Cheng's first sacrifice in Faerun, but it would not be the last. Not only could he use all of Axel Thew's spell-like abilities through the connection of the tentacles, he could also slowly digest and absorb some of the demon's advantages, such as magic resistance and immunity, telepathy, and the ability to summon demons. Of course, the downside was that before he completely digested the demon, he had to be careful not to let his chest suffer any serious injuries. Otherwise, Axel Thew might awaken and resist his control. When that happened, he might even be killed off due to internal and external troubles. However, all of this was worth it. At the very least, in Zhang Cheng's eyes, he was unsure if he could return the dragon's body. Rather than wasting resources, it was better to use them for dangerous experiments that he had not dared to do before, especially to accumulate experience in biological modification. As for whether absorbing the demon would bring additional chaotic effects to his brain, he did not care at all. After all, one would not feel itchy when one had too many lice. Drizzt, who had recovered from the effects of magic intimidation, stared dumbfoundedly at Axel Thew disappearing into the dragon's body bit by bit. In the end, he could not help but ask loudly, "What did you do? You mean this?" Zhang Cheng pointed at his healed chest. "It's just a small experiment. Don't worry, he won't have the chance to make trouble for you in the future." "No, I'm referring to your crazy behavior. Also, why are you nearby?" The dark elf looked as if he was facing a great enemy. Although he had seen many terrible things in the Underdark, he had never seen anything as shocking as today. A powerful demon, a ruthless character that even the matriarchs of Morseblight City had to tread carefully, was now stuffed into the stomach of a dragon. "Of course I'm nearby to help you deal with this dangerous enemy. You should know that if I hadn't intervened just now, you would already be a dead soul under his sword." Zhang Cheng didn't care about the other party's hostile attitude at all and replied indifferently. To be honest, his mind was filled with thoughts of slaughter and destruction. He didn't like this dark elf's personality at all. However, in order to not expose himself prematurely, he still needed a ranger to take the lead and complete this dangerous journey. "Can you tell me what you're trying to do? You seem to have joined Akar Kaiser's camp this afternoon, but you didn't hesitate to ambush Axel Thew just now. I don't understand. Whose side are you on?" Drizzt carefully probed. He had experienced countless betrayals in Morseblight City and knew that evil was never a monolithic entity. On the contrary, there were times when they wished to kill each other. If he could pull a dragon to his side, then the endless army of monsters outside the city walls wouldn't be so despairing. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly sensed the dark elf's intentions. He pursed his lips and replied in a playful tone, I'm not on either side. I only fight for myself. How about it? Do you want to make a deal with me? A deal? What's the deal? Drizzt's lilac eyes lit up with curiosity. To be honest, he had seen dragons before and understood how arrogant these winged lizards were. However, the one in front of him seemed to be the complete opposite of its kind. Not only was it not arrogant in the slightest, it was filled with indescribable madness and wisdom. Very simple. I'll tell you how to defeat the clown in the magic crystal tower and help you defeat those annoying goblins, orcs, half-orcs, trolls, and ogres. In exchange, you'll provide me with a comfortable, quiet place to stay and enough food to last me through the winter. Zhang Cheng directly laid out his conditions. He needed some time to grasp the magical theories of the Pharaon continent before he went to Luskan as planned. Additionally, he planned to build an army of his own during the chaos. Those defeated orcs, ogres, trolls, and giants were the ideal choice. After all, he still had half a bottle of blood from the Abyssal Lord of the Burning Legion in his magic pouch. He only needed a few drops to contaminate a water source, and he would quickly gain a fearless, vicious, and brutal army. That's it. A place to stay, and some food. Drizzt could not believe that the dragon's conditions were so generous. He had thought that the dragon would ask for all the treasures of the 10 towns as a reward. That's right. That's it. I know you can't make the decision, so help me convey the conditions to those who hold authority. If they agree, please hang up a black flag, and I'll fulfill my promise when I see it. Oh, right. If you intend to enter the magic crystal tower, I have a small suggestion. Bring a bag of flour. Trust me, it'll have an unexpected effect. Having said that, Zhang Cheng pretended to blink playfully, spreading his wings and quickly disappearing into the night. He was very clear that the dust of this battle had already settled. Akkar Castle, who had lost Axelthew, could not possibly and did not have the wisdom to reverse the situation. The only value this lowly acolyte had left was to turn the magic crystal fragments into ownerless items. At the same time, Drizzt Dutchelden had also used the cover of the night to silently enter Bryn Sander, intending to find one of his good friends, the halfling Regis, to discuss the terms. Chapter 425. Early the next morning, the halfling Regis, who had an important mission on his shoulders, passed through the city gates and walked quickly towards the location of the magic crystal tower. Yesterday afternoon, the foolish Akkar Kaiser had not destroyed all resistance in one fell swoop while he was at his strongest. Instead, he had pretended to be generous and given an ultimatum. He had threatened the 10 towns, including Bryn Sander, to surrender unconditionally, or else he would use the power of the broken magic crystals to kill everyone. At the same time, Drizzt, who had not slept a wink the entire night, was lurking around the magic crystal tower. With the help of the eyes of the Guan Haifa, a magical creature from the astral plane, he was trying to find the secret passage that led to the tower. In his conversation with Axelthew, he had already learned some secrets about the broken magic crystals, so he was prepared to risk his life to assassinate Akkar Kaiser. Living with his evil compatriots for so long had always made him feel an inexplicable sense of guilt, and it was this sense of guilt that made him desire redemption more than anyone else. Stopping an evil magus and his powerful army of monsters was one of the best ways to prove himself. As an outsider, Zhang Cheng was very clear about the Dark Elf's inner thoughts, so he did not stop him. He only smiled meaningfully, and soon lay on the ground to continue flipping through the magic books and notes that he had obtained not long ago. As for the goblins, orcs, half-orcs, trolls, and other monsters, they all trembled under the innate might of the giant dragon, not daring to take even half a step closer. After about half an hour, a large crack suddenly appeared on the surface of the magic crystal tower. Asterisk kacha, 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 asterisk kacha. Asterisk soon after, more cracks began to cover the surface of the tower. Before the surrounding monsters could react to what had happened, large pieces of crystal shards fell from the sky, smashing the goblins who could not dodge in time into meat paste. No, damn it. Look at what you've done. You're committing suicide. Akar Kaiser's ear-piercing screams reverberated in the air above the shattered tower. Even though he had tried many times to summon the black dragon lying not far from the magic crystal tower to help him, it was a pity that the dragon did not respond at all. With no other choice, he could only use the remaining power of the tower to enter a mirror, and the dark elf followed closely behind. When the two of them opened their eyes again, they were no longer near the magic crystal tower. Instead, they were at the peak of Kane's giant cone. But it was a pity that Akar Kaiser didn't learn his lesson at all. He raised Clinchinian high and brazenly showed off the unparalleled power of the divine artifact. As a result, he accidentally triggered an avalanche. There were no surprises. It was accompanied by a deafening explosion. The white snow quickly gathered together, forming an unparalleled destructive force. Zhang Cheng could even see the dark elves running with all their might to avoid being buried alive. As for Akar Kai saw, at this moment, he had already been abandoned by the shattered magic crystals and was completely buried under the terrifying snow. He also saw the place where the divine artifact was buried. The plan is unexpectedly smooth, isn't it? Zhang Cheng curled his lips and muttered softly to himself. He then turned around and glanced at the black flag hanging on the walls of Bryn Sander. He quickly put away his book and leaped into the air, spewing a lethal dragon breath at the goblins who were wildly attacking the city walls. Boom! The high-temperature flames that were hot enough to melt metal instantly burned more than 100 goblins huddled together into ashes. More than a dozen were burned into crippled and seriously injured. They fell to the ground and wailed in pain. Even more goblins were terrified and turned around to escape. They couldn't believe it. Why would this giant dragon suddenly turn around and attack them? The two frost giants who took over Akar Kaiser's command of the army were also surprised. They even forgot to give orders to their ogres and trolls. My God, that dragon actually fulfilled his promise. Cassios, the leader of Bryn Sander, subconsciously opened his mouth wide. Although the spokesman spent several hours discussing the dragon in the latter half of the night yesterday, they never thought that the other party would fulfill his promise so easily. It was completely unlike the style of an evil dragon. Don't think too much. Let's get rid of the enemy in front of us first. No matter what, he's helping us now. Another strong man with a full beard patted the former's shoulder gently, then raised his axe and led the people to chase after the fleeing goblins. Anyone who had adventured in the wild knew that for the goblins, if they couldn't all be defeated at once, these evil little monsters would soon regroup and attack the surrounding merchants, villages, and towns. Blood and fire, sword and lives. Normally, in such a large-scale battle with more than thousands of people, both sides would bleed to the last drop of blood. Even if they won, it would only be a Pyrrhic victory. It would take many years for them to recover. But now, Zhang Cheng's participation had tipped the scales of victory in Ten Town's favor. With his sturdy dragon scales that normal weapons could not pierce, and his deadly flame breath, every time he swooped down, he would cause a considerable amount of damage. If the damage to the morale of the monsters was taken into account, it could be said that wherever he passed by, the monsters would start to retreat rapidly. In just 7 or 8 minutes, the two frost giants realized that they couldn't win this battle at all. They abandoned their troops and ran toward the depths of the frozen wasteland. After a while, the ogres, orcs, and half-orcs also began to retreat from the battlefield one after another, leaving the trolls and goblins, who weren't very smart, as cannon fodder. Just as the residents of 10 towns were about to celebrate their victory, Zhang Cheng followed the scattered footprints on the ground and caught up with an orc tribe marked by a winter wolf. Unlike most orc tribes, this tribe didn't have a large population, only less than 150 people. There were no women, old people, or children. All of them were adult men. The leader was very tall and strong, wearing a half-body armor that he had snatched from somewhere. He held a huge axe that shone with a faint magical light in his hand. Although they were retreating, the team wasn't messy at all. To be precise, he took the opportunity to attack the other 2 orc tribes and snatched a large amount of food from them. With this food, this orc tribe wouldn't be devoured by all kinds of terrifying beasts due to the excessive loss of physical strength in the process of escaping like other tribes. Obviously, the leader of the orcs wasn't as stupid as his kind. Instead, he was full of wisdom and foresight. And what Zhang Cheng needed now was a wise and far-sighted subordinate. Chapter 426. It's you. Are you here to kill us? The leading orc chieftain gripped his axe tightly and asked nervously. There was no way he wouldn't be nervous. It was important to know that flames were the nemesis of almost all creatures in the extreme north. Be it the frost giants, white dragons, or the cunning winter wolves, they would all suffer additional damage from the flames, not to mention an orc tribe that lacked the ability to cast spells. Kill us? No. On the contrary, I'm here to recruit you. Kneel now and swear your loyalty to me. I will bestow upon you a gift, a precious and powerful gift. Zhang Cheng stared at them with eyes filled with madness and destruction as he replied, Loyalty. The orc chieftain was stunned for a moment before a trace of joy appeared on his ugly face. He knelt on one knee without hesitation and patted his chest. I, Chief Gar of the Winter Wolf tribe, I am willing to serve you as my master, the powerful black dragon. I am willing as well. And me. In an instant, over 100 strong orc warriors knelt down one after another. After all, to a primitive and barbaric orc tribe, pledging loyalty to a dragon, a demon, or even a human magus that was stronger than them was nothing. Almost every adult dragon had one or two orc tribes under their command, so there was no problem of psychological barriers. Moreover, by borrowing the strength of their master, these tribes could often quickly develop and strengthen themselves through plundering. They did not have to worry about being surrounded and annihilated by some kind adventurers or righteous paladins. In short, compared to the complicated thoughts of humans, orcs were very simple. They were satisfied with food, the occasional drink, and the ability to go out and slay people frequently. Looking at the numerous fellows kneeling at his feet, Zhang Cheng's sinister face revealed a satisfied smile. Very good. Now follow me. I will bestow upon you great power. Having said that, he spread his wings once more and slowly flew towards the north. About half an hour later, he landed in a cave with a hot spring. When the rest of the orcs arrived, he took out the blood of the Abyssal Lord and lightly dripped 2 drops into the hot spring. Instantly, the entire fountain boiled. The mouth of the spring was like a main artery that had been cut open. Crimson blood gushed out endlessly. Even Zhang Cheng, the culprit, couldn't help but frown at the pungent smell. But soon, he returned to normal. He pointed at the spring water and said to the orc chief, Drink it, Gar. After drinking it, you will feel what true power is. Thank you for your gift, master. Gars didn't say anything else and drank the scarlet spring water in one go. In the blink of an eye, his originally well-developed muscles became even more exaggerated, and his skin turned dark red as he roared in pain. After the power of the spring water had completely transformed his body, the orc chieftain crawled up from the ground. His eyes were like that of a demon crawling out from the abyss, filled with bloodlust. He laughed sinisterly and cheered loudly. Awesome! This is the power I desire. Thank you, generous and merciful master. I only need one hand to kill the strongest winter wolf. Remember, I'll give you one winter to conquer the entire frozen wasteland. Whether it's goblins, orcs, half-orcs, trolls, ogres, giants, barbarians, or winter wolves, they will all become part of the army in spring next year. Thanks to the idiot Akar Kaiser's help, the 10 towns have suffered considerable losses and have no time to care about what's happening in the wasteland, so you don't have to worry about the threat from humans. In addition, it's time to change your tribe's flag. Zhang Cheng gave a direct order. He believed that with this spring water contaminated by the blood of the Lord of the Abyss, conquering the weakened wasteland tribe would not be a problem at all. Understood. Please rest assured, when spring comes next year, the entire wasteland will submit to the dragon's flag. Gars gave a guarantee without thinking. As one orc after another drank the spring water, he could basically confirm that the strength and fighting skills of his 150 warriors were not inferior to the ogres and half-giants. What was the concept of 150 ogres or half-giants? When they gathered together, they could easily defeat a human army 10 or even 20 times their number. They could make most of the towns give up resistance and choose to surrender. In addition, the frozen wasteland was already short of food, so the number of people in each tribe rarely exceeded 300, and a large number of them were the elderly, the weak, women, and children. Gars felt that he could completely wipe out and annex every tribe he encountered, and then let those who were willing to pledge their loyalty drink the spring water and develop like a snowball. As for those who were not willing to pledge their loyalty, they could all die. Anyway, no one would care about a few hundred more corpses in the wasteland. Sensing the strong bloodlust in the orc chief's eyes, Zhang Cheng's face showed a hint of playfulness. He quickly left the cave and flew back to the 10 towns along the same path. There was no doubt that this batch of Pharaon version of the fell orcs created with the blood of the Lord of the Abyss was an indispensable part of his future plan. If one looked at the map of the Pharaon continent, they would know that Icewind Valley was located at the northernmost tip of the west coast, separated from the outside world by a towering mountain range called the Ridge of the World. The only place that maintained a small amount of trade and communication with Icewind Valley was Luskan, the city of 1,000 sails in the south. This port city was full of slave traders, pirates, thieves, bandits, and smugglers. It had always been a breeding ground for evil and was controlled by a spell-casting organization called the Arcane Brotherhood. Zhang Cheng's goal was to first join the Arcane Brotherhood as a wizard apprentice, then split, disintegrate, subvert, and seize control of this organization from the inside. Then, he would carry out a series of modifications to make it his base in this world. After all, there were all kinds of churches and secret societies in the Pharaon continent. The power of one person would sooner or later suffer a great loss. To achieve this, a strong army was necessary. At the very least, he had to subdue those rebellious pirates to ensure that the whole city obeyed his will. Of course, the reason why Zhang Cheng chose Luskan and not other towns in the north was that he had considered it very carefully. After all, Luskan was a city of evil. It had always been in conflict with the good camp of Deepwater City and Neverwinter. Attacking it would not cause disgust in the surrounding areas, but would instead cause people to applaud. This also meant that the possibility of external interference was ruled out. Whoever could control those audacious pirates would have a firm control over Luskan. With this as the center, they would slowly expand their influence to the surrounding areas, waiting for an opportunity to destroy one of their biggest competitors, Neverwinter. In order to suppress the madness that was constantly affecting his brain, Zhang Cheng knew that he had to find a way to vent, and this way was through war. Chapter 427. As the cold wind from the extreme north swept across the land, Icewind Valley and 10 towns finally officially announced the beginning of the terrible winter. The winter here was different from what most people understood. Strictly speaking, the winter here had exceeded the limit that humans could endure. The coldest days could even reach more than minus 60 degrees Celsius. Moreover, the duration of the day was very short. There were even polar nights that lasted for a week or two without a trace of sunlight. In such a harsh environment, except for those creatures that had evolved special physiques in the cold environment, any outdoor activity was basically equivalent to suicide. So the only thing that the residents of 10 towns could do was to hide in their homes and enjoy the dried fish and smoked meat that they caught in the summer. They also lit the fuel mixed with herbivore feces to stay warm. Even though the war started by Akar Kaiser had caused the residents of Icewind Valley to suffer heavy losses, and they had no choice but to use strict rationing to allow more people to survive the cruel winter, they had at least survived and did not have to live together with the annoying barbarians. Due to Zhang Cheng's intervention, although Wulfgar still used his powerful force to persuade some of his people to come and help, there were only less than 200 of them. In addition, the war had already ended by the time they arrived, so they could only choose to leave in disgrace after failing to gain the approval of the residents of 10 towns. The barbarians had no idea that a powerful army was sweeping across the entire frozen wilderness under the cover of the cold wind. It would not be long before they became one of the targets to be conquered. By then, they would either choose to surrender or be slaughtered. There would never be a third situation. As the mastermind behind all this, Zhang Cheng was lying in the best house in 10 towns in his human form, eating a sumptuous dinner while flipping through the spellbook that originally belonged to the Red Wizard Emokai. After more than half a month of study and research, he had completed the basic theory part. Yesterday, he took the time to crack the protective spell cast on it and began to explore the unique spell casting skills of the Faerun continent, so that he could convert his mage profession template to the spell casting level of this world. Of course, before that, he still needed to touch the magic net. Through the description in the basic teaching materials, he already understood that although the goddess of magic controlled the magic net, she would not casually prohibit anyone from using it, even if the other party was the goddess enemy. This also meant that unless they directly attacked the goddess herself, there was no need to worry about being banned from touching the net. Just as Zhang Cheng was concentrating on deciphering the wonderful spells in the book, the tightly shut door was suddenly pushed open, and a figure walked in with a bone-chilling wind. He first closed the door again, then shook off the snow on his cloak, put a huge elk on the ground, and bowed elegantly with one hand on his chest. "Good evening, Your Excellency. I've brought you fresh meat. I'm sure you won't mind a change if you're tired of dried fish and bacon." "Thank you. But this kind of weather should be quite unbearable for the Dark Elves, right? But why do you still go out hunting every few days and bring me fresh food?" Zhang Cheng touched his chin and asked meaningfully. Drizzt had visited him every few days since he had taken up residence in Bryn Shander, delivering elk, rabbits, and fish, no matter how bad the weather. Perhaps an ordinary person would think that the Dark Elf Ranger was expressing his gratitude, but he knew very well that this was actually a disguised form of surveillance and distrust. After all, his current identity was that of a terrifying evil dragon, a monster that could easily turn an entire town into a sea of fire, so it was very normal for the ranger to be on guard. "I only hope that you won't fly into a rage because you're dissatisfied with the food. Besides, I've already been on the surface for a long time and have more or less adapted to the harsh climate here." Drizzt took 2 steps back and allowed the servants to carry the heavy elk into the kitchen. The leader of Bryn Shander, Cassius, had not only given up his residence to Zhang Cheng, but also arranged for 2 maids and 2 male servants to take care of his daily life. Thus, it didn't take long for the servants to finish dealing with the elk, bringing steaming hot stew and bone broth to the dining table. "Let's eat together." Zhang Cheng pushed a plate of meat and a bowl of broth forward. "Thank you very much." Drizzt didn't decline and sat down graciously. He picked up the bowl and carefully sipped the scalding bone broth, warming up his frozen body after a few mouthfuls. However, his attention clearly wasn't on the food. Instead, he was sizing up the elf from the corner of his eyes. After 3 to 5 minutes, he feigned nonchalance and asked, "Sir, are you learning magic?" "Yes, I'm very interested in magic. If you have relevant books or notes, I'm willing to exchange them with something of equal value." Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. "I don't understand. You're already a powerful existence that commands respect. Why do you still want to learn magic?" The dark elf put on a puzzled expression. In his memories, dragons should be lazy and arrogant. Most dragons would rather lie down and sleep on treasures than leave their lairs and enter the human world, let alone learn martial arts and magical knowledge. Powerful? Am I really that powerful? Zhang Cheng put down the utensils in his hands, a playful look in his eyes. He quickly shook his head. "No, Ranger. Dobie, there are many things in this world that are more powerful than me. For example, the powerful undead spellcasters, liches. Then there are those infamous old dragons and powerful legendary mages. Any one of them can kill me. And that's not even considering the high and mighty gods and the terrifying abyssal lords. So you want to use the power of magic to make up for the difference?" Drizzt seemed to have thought of something and subconsciously frowned. "That's right. Knowledge is power. I need to learn, starting from the beginning and swimming in the sea of magic one step at a time. Perhaps the prejudice and discrimination from your childhood made you unable to understand the greatness of magic. However, I can tell you that this is a power that can kill gods with the body of a mortal." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng's eyes were once again filled with flames of madness and destruction. It took him a lot of effort to suppress them. One last question. How long do you intend to stay in 10 towns? The dark elf's sharp senses detected a fleeting aura, and all the muscles in his body involuntarily tightened. 1 winter. At the beginning of spring next year, I'll choose to head south to Luskan. Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide anything and directly revealed a part of his plan. Beginning of spring? My dwarf friend Bruno is also going on an adventure at the beginning of spring. If you don't mind, would you like to come with us? Drizzt quickly extended an invitation. He didn't need to ask to know that Drizzt hoped to get rid of this potential threat while he was away. Chapter 4:28. While Zhang Cheng was lying in the warm house and enjoying his dinner, Gar was leading 40 orc warriors who had drunk the spring water, 7 ogres, 30 bugbears, and 300 ordinary goblins who had become abnormally ferocious after being strengthened by the spring water. With the cover of the cold wind, they approached the camp of a barbarian tribe. After a period of conquest, he had completely controlled the territory that originally belonged to Akar Kai Saw, and made those who were willing to offer their loyalty and had gone through the test drink the spring water. Although many unlucky fellows with weak constitutions had been torn apart by the terrifying power in the process, those who survived had all been strengthened, whether in strength, agility, or physique. Other than that, there were also some orcs, half-orcs, and goblins who were not very strong who had obtained interesting spell-like abilities. Some of them could control green flames to burn their enemies, while others could gather terrifying negative energy and cause their enemies to die in pain and anguish. All in all, the additional power brought by the spring water was making Gar's army stronger and stronger. They were even stronger than when they were under the control of the broken magic crystals. This made him more and more certain that he had followed the right master. Chief, a total of 25 tents, at most 240 people. The enemy is completely unprepared. A scout panted as he ran over to report. Although the bone-piercing cold wind made him very uncomfortable, his eyes flashed with a strong bloodlust and cruelty. Very good. According to the plan, surround all the tents first. Remember, this is the first barbarian tribe we are about to conquer. I hope these idiots know what's good for them, or I don't mind using another method to integrate them. With that, a trace of savagery appeared on Gar's ugly face. When the orcs around heard this, they couldn't help but break out into laughter. Everyone knew that the integration the chief spoke of was actually killing all the men and leaving only the fertile women behind. Then, the strongest warriors would be repeatedly raped until they gave birth to mixed-blood orc offspring. In this land where civilization could not reach, this was the usual way for a tribe to annex another tribe. Because there was no so-called reproductive isolation, in a dozen years at most, the tribes that had been swallowed would completely disappear, and the surviving women would lose the will to resist in the repeated ravages, turning into reproductive tools and walking corpses. The orcs moved quickly. In less than 10 minutes, they had surrounded the camp of the barbarians from all directions. At the same time, the barbarians had also discovered the enemies surging out from the darkness, and they began to shout at the top of their lungs. In the blink of an eye, more than 40 adult male barbarians came out of the tent, all of them holding crude weapons and looking nervous. Needless to say, these were all the warriors of this tribe. The rest were either women, old, young, sick, or disabled. Seeing this, Garz immediately waved at the warrior behind him. The latter understood and quickly ran to the front of the group. Facing the biting cold north wind, he shouted, "The barbarians inside, listen up. You've been surrounded. Either throw down your weapons and surrender immediately, or wait to be slaughtered. I guarantee that you won't have a chance to escape. Who are you? Why are you attacking us in winter?" A 40-year-old, weather-beaten, one-eyed warrior took 2 steps forward and questioned loudly. To the north of the ridge of the world, all the tribes had an unwritten rule. To avoid losing too many people, they would not attack in winter. We are the servants of the great dark dragon king. Under his orders, we unify the frozen wastelands. Decide now, will you submit to our banner and serve our master, or will you disappear forever and become food for the hungry beasts? The orc puffed out his chest and stared with his blood-red eyes, waiting for an answer. If the other party dared to say no, he would be the first to charge in and cut down the enemy's chief with the sharp blade in his hand. The one-eyed barbarian carefully observed his surroundings. After a full minute, he took a deep breath and stood out alone, roaring, "The people of Tampa will never surrender without a fight. I request a duel, a fair one-on-one duel. The victor gets everything." Ha ha ha. A duel? A chief. He's asking for a duel. The orc warrior couldn't help but laugh out loud. He wasn't the only one. All the orc warriors behind him couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Perhaps the barbarians were some of the most outstanding warriors in the extreme north before drinking the spring water. Now, however, they were no match for the orc warriors. Garz didn't even plan to fight personally. He only made a throat-slitting gesture at his subordinate in front of him. The orc warrior understood tacitly. He unsheathed his two-handed sword, which glinted with cold light. He sneered and crooked his finger. "Come, I'll let you know that you're as pitiful as a lamb waiting to be slaughtered by our master's invincible power. Die." The one-eyed barbarian was obviously enraged. He swung his hammer, made of thick iron, and smashed it down. It had to be said that even according to the average smelting standards of Pharaon continent, his weapon was extremely poor. Apart from its weight, there was nothing to be proud of. Even so, a few of the young barbarians still had expressions of excitement and admiration on their faces. The barbarians of Icewind Valley were originally a nomadic tribe. They couldn't even smelt the most basic bronze. Some of their spears were simply sharpened wooden sticks. Therefore, a hammer made of pig iron was already an incredible weapon. But what happened next left all the barbarians dumbfounded. The orc warrior didn't even try to dodge. He raised his thick left arm and grabbed the hammer that was falling from the sky. He then slashed his opponent in half with his sword. Ah! Cries of agony could be heard as bright red blood splattered all over the white snow. His intestines and innards all spilled out. No barbarian could believe that their powerful leader couldn't even last a single round and was killed by an orc. However, after a short silence, some of the barbarians who couldn't accept the reality started shouting their slogans for revenge and charged forward. The orc warrior didn't hesitate at all. He waved his huge sword made of steel and killed all of them one by one. In the blink of an eye, there were more than 10 corpses on the snowy ground. Just as the angry barbarians were about to put all their eggs in one basket, a young girl came out of the tent and sternly stopped them. "Enough. There's no need to sacrifice any more people. We surrender. We surrender." Under her persuasion, the few remaining barbarian warriors finally chose to throw away the weapons in their hands and shut their eyes in humiliation. Chapter 429. As an orc chieftain who had grown up in a cruel environment, Gar was smarter and better at thinking than others of his kind. Taking advantage of the blizzard, he led his subordinates to attack 3 or 4 medium-sized barbarian tribes before returning to the main camp with his spoils of war and captives. He clearly knew that as the snowstorm gradually subsided, his sneak attack tactics would not be as effective. Once 1 or 2 barbarians escaped during the battle, it wouldn't take long for all the barbarians in Icewind Valley to receive the news. Even though he had the Red Spring water as his backup, he was not afraid to fight a tough battle with these proud barbarians and completely destroy them. But considering his own losses and the potential benefits of incorporating the barbarians, he finally gave up on the idea of fighting them head-on. After all, winter had just begun, and there was still plenty of time. There was no need to rush into taking risks. Moreover, he had another plan, a plan to annex the barbarians that would not alert them too much. Just as they returned to the giant cave with the hot spring, the victorious orc warriors snatched the spoons and bowls from the hands of the goblin servants, scooping large pieces of meat, fish, and prawns from the stone pot and stuffing them into their mouths. On the empty ground not far away, a large whale had been dismembered. The red meat was cut into small pieces, some thrown into the pot to cook and eat, while the rest was thrown outside to be frozen for storage. The tongue and the fatty parts were used to extract oil so that the soldiers could apply it on their bodies when they went out to battle. It could prevent the rapid loss of heat and prevent the skin from cracking and getting frostbite in the cold wind. As for the bones and skin, The former could be used to cook soup and make simple weapons, while the latter could be wrapped inside armor to resist impact damage and keep warm at the same time. In short, ever since Zhang Cheng had taught these orcs how to hunt whales before he left, they did not have to worry about food anymore. Every once in a while, the orcs would carry hammers and chisels and dig a large hole in the ice a few kilometers away. When the whale at the bottom of the sea floated up for air, they would stab the thick javelins into the hole and then follow behind to Red Sea water to wait patiently for the whale to be exhausted. As no one in the Faron continent had realized the economic value of hunting whales, there were so many whales in the sea that it was a disaster. It was not a problem to feed a few thousand people. The invincible Great Chieftain, please have a taste of a delicious food prepared by your humble servant. A human man who looked to be in his 30s knelt on one knee and placed a pot of steaming hot stew on the stone table in front of the chair. Did anything happen while I was away, Eve? Garz asked without raising his head as he picked up the pot and ate the stewed meat with some spices and salt. Of course not. Everything is under your control. Not long ago, the kobolds discovered an underground mine, along with the 3 captured dwarven blacksmiths. It won't be long before your army will have an endless supply of the best weapons and armor. At that time, the entire Icewind Valley will be your kingdom and hunting ground. Anyone who overestimates themselves and dares to stop you from conquering will be crushed in an instant. The man called Eve resisted the fear in his heart and praised loudly. As a merchant who had first been captured by Akar Kaiser and then accidentally fallen into the hands of monsters, he was undoubtedly very clear about his situation. He had no intention of escaping at all, because even if he did, he would not be able to pass through the perilous frozen wastelands. He might as well serve the orcs wholeheartedly. He could see that this powerful orc chieftain with red skin was obviously different from the ordinary orcs, whose minds were filled with fighting and killing. As long as he contributed his management skills, he would not have to worry about being killed, abused, or tortured. On the contrary, he had now been appointed as the chief of internal affairs of this increasingly large tribe. His position was not only above the many goblin servants, but he also had 2 exclusive orc bodyguards. After hearing this, Gar swallowed the meat in his mouth and nodded in satisfaction. Very good. Master will definitely be satisfied with our progress. As a reward, I authorize you to choose a woman from among the captives. A woman. Eve subconsciously raised his head and glanced at the barbarian woman whose hands were firmly tied with ropes. His eyes instantly shone with the light of a hungry wolf. Even though female barbarians were far taller and stronger than ordinary humans, they usually did not fit the aesthetic standards of a normal person. However, to a person who had been abstinent for several years, and whose female creatures were either goblins, half-orcs, orcs, ogres, and other monsters, they were completely naked temptation. In particular, there was a young girl who looked to be only 17 or 18 years old with a head of long blonde hair. It made him feel like he was burning with lust. Unfortunately, before Eve could ask for it, Garz crooked his finger at the girl. Come here. I have a question for you to answer. The latter obviously hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she carefully came to the table and observed everything around her with eyes full of fear. Until now, she still could not believe that the other party was able to gather such a large army right under her nose. He did not even need to go out to hunt to feed thousands of soldiers. First, tell me your name. Garz casually placed the empty pot to the side and sized her up with interest. Malvina. If you want to know why those warriors obeyed my orders, the reason is simple. I am the daughter of the chieftain, and the person your warriors killed was my father. The girl lowered her head and explained. Oh, the daughter of the chieftain. Garz was slightly surprised, but he immediately smiled and asked, Then why did you surrender? Normally, shouldn't you be risking everything to avenge your father? No, hatred is meaningless. It can't bring us food, and it can't allow us to survive. Compared to revenge, I care more about living. With that, Malvina clenched her fists, a strong desire to live showing on her face. Garz looked into the girl's eyes, as if judging how much of her words were true and how much was a lie. After a full minute, he laughed without restraint. Ha ha, you are very special. At least, You are special among the barbarians who view death as the highest glory. Now, I will give you a chance to change your fate. Kneel down and pledge your loyalty to the great master, and then I will return your tribe to you. At the same time, I will grant you great power and authority. I am willing, but you have to tell me, who is the great master? Without any hesitation, Malvina knelt down directly. Unlike most of her people who believed in Tempest, she had not chosen her own faith and did not care about good or evil. Her only desire was to live and prove the value of her existence through some means. Very good. Our master is the great Black Dragon King, and the power he possesses is far beyond your imagination. Come, drink this gift, and then you'll understand what I mean. Chapter 430. While Garz was planning to conquer the barbarians and unify the entire frozen wasteland, Zhang Cheng, who was far away in the most luxurious house in 10 towns, was not idle. To be exact, he had just completed the ritual of touching the net and was hiding in an empty cellar. He stared at the broken magic crystal in his hand that had almost lost its luster with a strange expression on his face. In fact, he had kept this powerful and evil artifact in his bag as early as the end of the final battle in Icewind Valley, but he had never had the time to check it. Of course, during this period, Clinchinian had tried to communicate with him through dreams, hints, and other means. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng's mind had long been filled with Nisario's madness and desire to destroy. In addition to the tempting whispers of the ancient gods, the mere spiritual hints were drowned out before they could even make a splash. He did not even realize that the broken magic crystal was communicating with him, until a few minutes ago when he tried to cast a level 2 spell, Catalytic Potion. A strange magical power suddenly emerged, allowing this spell to be released smoothly. It had to be said that in the countless years that Clinchinian had been born, he had never been so aggrieved as he was now. Not only was he thrown into a dark bag that could not absorb any energy, but he was also completely ignored by the owner. If he had legs, he would have left this annoying place long ago to find the next weak-willed mortal. However, because the foolish Akar Kaiser had used up almost all of his energy before he died, the broken magic crystal was now in its weakest state. It could not even emit energy waves to lure the people of the evil camp to come find him. You want me to start a war? Zhang Cheng frowned and asked through the spiritual connection. That's right. You are a dragon, a powerful dragon with destructive power. I can recruit a loyal army for you. I can let you obtain supreme power, beauty, and treasures. Clinchinian also said through the spiritual connection. Then what about after the war? Suppose I win a war, seize a large piece of fertile land, and build a powerful kingdom. What should I do next? Zhang Cheng continued to ask with a faint smile. Continue to expand. Conquer all the land that can be conquered. Let all creatures crawl at your feet. You are the king, the supreme ruler of this world. The broken magic crystal gave its answer without hesitation. After listening to this meaningless and illogical nonsense, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Sorry, I have to reject your proposal. Perhaps you are very smart and have a thinking ability that is smarter than most ordinary people, but you do not have the slightest rationality. You are like an insatiable child who only knows how to create chaos, destruction, and destruction. You do not know when to restrain yourself or when to restrain yourself. If one day someone uses your power to rule the world, then what they get will be nothing but ruins. No, I can feel it. Terrifying madness and destruction are hidden in the depths of your subconsciousness. I can help you realize those terrible ideas. Clinzinabin seemed to have been provoked and let out a roar that went straight to his soul. Haha, I've never doubted that. But it's a pity that extreme madness and destruction aren't what I'm after. On the contrary, I hope to maintain my rationality amidst endless destruction and madness. You will never understand the importance of rationality. Well, that's the end of our conversation. Don't worry, after some time, I'll find you a suitable wielder. After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Cheng once again threw Clinzinabin into the dust-filled pocket to ensure that it would never come in contact with even the slightest bit of sunlight. Although he had already realized that the broken magic crystal was not suitable for him after a short conversation, it did not affect the fact that the broken magic crystal was part of his plan to seize Luskan. Especially in the Arcane Brotherhood, there were many ambitious fellows who desired to obtain Clinzinabin so that they could obtain the power to challenge the master of the tower. Conspiracy, betrayal, assassination, for the people of the evil alignment, all of this was as easy as eating and drinking. Zhang Cheng could not wait to see the entire Arcane Brotherhood set off a terrifying storm of blood under the instigation of the broken magic crystal. When the mages realized that they could not control Clinzinabin at all, he would suddenly appear and put a stop to the chaotic situation. It was just like the first lesson about politics that he learned from little finger Peter Baelish in the world of the Song of Ice and Fire. Chaos was the staircase to the end of power. It had to be said that the master behind the parchment scroll had trained Zhang Cheng very well. Through constant learning and tests, he had already obtained wisdom and strength that far exceeded his peers. Even when his mind was filled with madness and the desire to destroy, he could still make the right decision subconsciously. Returning to the hall on the first floor, he ignored the servants who were busy cleaning the house and cooking. Minding his own business, he went to a table full of tools such as alcohol lamps, beakers, test tubes, and so on. He tried to use the herbs he bought from the grocery store 2 days ago to concoct various interesting magic potions. Of course, these very precise tools were brought over from Earth, which greatly reduced the chances of failure. After a while, several bottles of potions of different colors were neatly inserted into the shelves. As for the failed concoction, the potions that emitted a pungent smell were not wasted. They were all packed into walnut-sized coarse glass bottles. When encountering an enemy, he only needed to cast a second circle spell, catalytic potion, on the liquid in these bottles, and they would instantly become dangerous energy bombs. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Zhang Cheng was immersed in exploring the mysterious and unknown knowledge of magic, there was a sudden knock on the door behind him. A servant hurriedly stopped what he was doing and ran over to open the door bolt, allowing a man wrapped in an animal skin cloak to come in. Without saying a word, he came forward and bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. Then, he placed a small leather pouch full of gemstones on the table. "Master, the potions that you gave me last time have all been sold to the dwarves. This is the reward they paid for it. Obviously, the dwarf king named Bruno is planning a long journey. He also promised that as long as you provide more potions, he can make some really good things for you. The materials are mithril and adamantine." Oomph. Stupid, stubborn, and short-sighted guy. Don't worry about him for the time being. If you need it, let him help you make a few mithril chainmail or weapons. Oh, right. How's the recruitment of people I asked you to do? Zhang Cheng glanced at the number and types of gems in the pouch with a disdainful expression on his face. Chapter 431. I'm sorry, Master. You should know that Ten Towns is a place where adventurers like to visit. Apart from Drizzt and a few of his friends, everyone with some ability has been recruited into the militia. Apart from an outstanding half-elf archer, the rest are not worthy of your recruitment. Then, the man took off his hood, revealing a pair of beast-like eyes and a claw covered in black scales. You still can't control the power of the dragon blood potion. Zhang Cheng glanced at him and frowned subconsciously. The man grinned with excitement and fanaticism on his face. He replied softly, "No, Master, I purposely left behind some features. It can remind me of what power is. Truly powerful power. Remember, Ian, don't let too many people see you. Perhaps the people in Icewind Valley wouldn't care about a little abnormality in appearance, but in the south of the ridge of the world, no matter if it's the bloodline of the Abyss, the bloodline of the Inferno, or the bloodline of the giant dragon, they will all be suspected and guarded. I don't want any accidents to happen before the plan is completed. Do you understand?" Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and warned. Needless to say, this guy named Ian must have undergone biological modification experiments and turned from a purebred human into a half-human, half-dragon life form. Originally, Zhang Cheng planned to use the method of Azeroth's Black Dragon King, Nefarian, to use his own blood to create loyal dragon men. but who knew that there would be an accident during the process, resulting in the created dragonmen not only having the form of a dragon man, but also retaining their original human form. This also meant that as long as the person was proficient in controlling the power of the bloodline, they would be able to switch between human and dragon man. After all, Zhang Cheng was now a powerful giant dragon. According to the tradition of the Faron continent, as long as one was strong enough, there would be people following them, regardless of whether they were good or evil, orderly or chaotic. As a famous giant hunter in 10 Towns, Ian, who was over 40 years old, longed for power to stop his body from aging, so he took the initiative to seek refuge. Now that he had become a half-dragon, not only had he recovered to the prime of his 30s, he could even open his mouth to spit out scorching flames. His strength, agility, and physique had all been greatly enhanced. Even though he didn't understand why a black dragon could spit out flames instead of acid, it didn't stop him from understanding his master's wild ambitions. His eyes, in particular, were filled with madness and destruction. It was simply chilling. Without any hesitation, Ian quickly bowed and promised, "Please don't worry, I know my limits. Also, do you want to meet the newly recruited half-elf archer, Tracy?" "No, there's no need. You're in charge of the arrangements. Don't forget to prepare everything in advance. When spring comes next year, we will set off for Luskan. A bigger and more exciting stage awaits us," Zhang Cheng instructed expressionlessly. Understood. Time flew. As the cold north wind gradually stopped, the winter that had lasted for several months was finally coming to an end. Although the temperature outside was still frighteningly cold in the eyes of many Southerners, for the residents of 10 Towns who made a living by fishing and herding, it was barely enough for them to do outdoor work. Otherwise, they would soon start to starve after using up their food reserves. Of course, for the old dwarf Bruno, after a busy winter, he could finally set off on his journey to find his legendary lost hometown, Mithril Hall. As one of his few friends, the dark elf ranger Drist Dutchelden volunteered to join him, and the idle barbarian Wolfgar also joined soon after. The latter had no idea that after an entire winter, there were no more barbarian tribes in the frozen wastes. They had either been destroyed by the army under Gars, or they had surrendered and become a part of the army. Right now, the army was hibernating in the depths of the wasteland, patiently waiting for their master's orders. Standing at the city gate of Bryn Sander, Bruno stared at Zhang Cheng, who was wearing black armor, with a vigilant expression. He turned around and whispered to his friend, "Hey, elf, are you sure you want to bring him along? He's a dragon. Relax, my good dwarf. He'll only go with us to Luskan, and then we'll go our separate ways. I'm sure you wouldn't want a terrifying dragon to stay in 10 Towns after we leave, right?" Driss smiled and patted Bruno's shoulder to comfort him. "I hate that look. He looks at us like we're pathetic ants." The barbarian Wolfgar muttered softly as he gripped his powerful magic warhammer. "Believe me, he's already considered quite modest among the dragons. I've seen worse than him. All right, don't think too much about it. No matter what, he's still an ally of 10 Towns in name. He helped us defeat Akar Kaiser's army of monsters." Drist shrugged helplessly as he spoke. He could understand the vigilance of his two friends, but in order to ensure the safety of 10 Towns, he had to eliminate this potential threat before it was too late. However, Zhang Cheng obviously didn't care about the hostile attitude of the barbarians. He was sizing up the young and beautiful half-elf beside Ian. After a while, he asked with a faint smile, "Are you a spy of the Harpist League?" Why do you ask?" The half-elf who called himself Tracy subconsciously became nervous. "No, it's nothing. I'm just asking." Zhang Cheng smiled meaningfully and gestured to Ian without batting an eyelid. The latter understood and quickly came forward. He carefully asked, "Master, do you think there's something wrong with him?" Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He nodded without hesitation. "That's right. Maybe I wasn't sure before I asked, but now I'm willing to bet that he's a spy of the Harpist League. Find a chance to kill him on the way. Be quick and don't leave too many traces." "Got it." A bloodthirsty smile flashed across Ian's face. He was a little puzzled as to why a powerful half-elf suddenly came to 10 Towns. It turned out that he was a member of the Harpist League. Everyone in the Faron continent knew about the Harpist League. It could be called one of the largest and most populous intelligence organizations on this land. The only organization that could compete with it was probably another intelligence organization, the Zenorum Guild. With the appearance of the divine artifact crystal shards, it was not surprising that the Harpist League sent someone to gather information. However, this Harpist League member obviously did something he shouldn't have done. He wanted to take the risk to gather more information about Zhang Cheng, the Black Dragon, and accidentally exposed himself. Chapter 432. Facing the bone-chilling wind, the party quickly crossed the endless frozen wasteland, intending to take the shortcut at the ridge of the world. Although the shortcut was a little dangerous, and they might encounter hungry beasts or monsters, the brave Bruno still chose to take the shortcut. In the eyes of the old dwarf, the party had a powerful black dragon. Even if they encountered any powerful monsters, they would only end up as an extra dish for dinner. There was no need to worry at all. Of course, when they passed by Bremen, the halfling Regis chased after them in a panic, saying that he would complete the adventure with his friends even if he was beaten to death. However, anyone with half a brain could see that he must have gotten into some kind of trouble, so much so that he did not even bring his basic luggage. Looking at the adventurer party that would become famous in the north in the future, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a hint of undetectable playfulness. At the same time, he muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Since Regis has escaped from the 10 towns, Artemis Entreri should show up soon. I just don't know if this sharp dagger can be used by me. Master, trouble is coming." Ian seemed to have discovered something. He quickly drew out his mithril longsword that flashed with white light and prepared for battle. More than a dozen large wolves slowly came out of the valley and surrounded the few people from all directions. The leader of the pack had pure white fur all over his body, and his eyes revealed a sinister and cunning light. "Damn it, it's the winter wolves and the wargs." Bruno cursed as he raised a shield and axe. As a dwarf who had lived in Icewind Valley for a long time, he was no stranger to these two kinds of beasts with high intelligence. He knew very well how difficult it was to deal with them. Not to mention the wargs that were good at all kinds of despicable tricks. The winter wolves that could spit ice were enough to make the adventurer party, who lacked long-range attacks, suffer. The winter wolf in the lead roughly judged the situation and immediately let out an ear-piercing howl. When the wargs heard it, they quickly spread out, taking advantage of the terrain and jumping down from high places to launch a surprise attack. "Tampus, please grant me courage and strength." Wolfgar shouted the name of the god of war. He swung his weapon and smashed a mount wolf to the ground. The powerful magic warhammer smashed the poor beast's head into pieces with a single blow. Brain matter mixed with blood immediately flowed all over the ground. However, the reckless barbarian obviously did not notice that another warg had taken the opportunity to pounce on him from behind, opening its mouth full of sharp teeth in an attempt to bite his neck. Behind you, Drizzt brandished the scimitar in his hand, forcing back the oncoming wolf. At the same time, he turned around and shouted a warning to his companions. But before Wolfgar could react, Zhang Cheng, who had been standing motionlessly, suddenly drew his demonic sword that emanated an evil aura and sliced the ambushing wolf into two halves with a poof. The black smoke surrounding the sword, as well as the faint howls of pain, made the young barbarian shiver. His eyes were filled with vigilance and fear. It wasn't just him. The dwarves, dark elves, and halflings all stopped what they were doing and looked sideways. "Why? Are you interested in my sword?" Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile, but his hands didn't stop moving. In the blink of an eye, he had used the swordsmanship instilled in his brain by the Dark Knight profession template to easily kill 4 wargs and devour their souls. "No, we just didn't expect you to have such outstanding swordsmanship." Drizzt quickly exchanged glances with Bruno and forced out a smile in response. He was now increasingly unable to see through this strange black dragon. He didn't even understand what was going on in his mind and what he was planning to do. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that this dragon had already left the 10 towns. The next one to have a headache would be the ruler of Luskan. I've said before that learning and knowledge are the steps to progress. As long as you have enough knowledge, even the weakest goblin can kill a god. All right, let's stop chatting. Let's quickly get rid of these annoying beasts and add some fresh meat for dinner. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng was like an arrow released from a bow, directly rushing towards the location of the winter wolves. Just as everyone's attention was drawn to him, the corners of Ian's mouth curled up into a bloodthirsty smile. He silently took out a dagger that glinted with a cold light and lightly slashed the back of Tracy's hand. In an instant, the half-elf swayed as if he was drunk and fell to the ground with a plop. Seeing this, the two orcs quickly pounced on him and bit his throat. In the blink of an eye, fresh blood dyed the snow red. Bastards! How dare you? Ian pretended to be shocked and angry. He stabbed one of them to death with his sword and kicked the other away. He then picked up Tracy's corpse and tried to stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, stopping the bleeding was of no use to a person who had already breathed his last. In the end, he could only put down the corpse and charge into the pack of wolves to kill. With their close cooperation and great acting skills, the two of them easily got rid of the hidden dangers in the group. After the battle ended, the clueless Drizzt and the others even held a small funeral for the spy of the Harpist Alliance. They then began to clean up the battlefield, mainly skinning off the precious hides of the winter wolves, and found a relatively safe place to set up camp. As for dinner, it was naturally stewed wolf meat and roasted wolf meat. Even though everyone knew that these wolves might have eaten living humans before, most people did not care about this in the extremely harsh environment of the frozen wastelands. The gluttonous halfling Regis even ate enough food for 3 people. After dinner, Ian stuffed a harp-like pendant and an unsent letter into Zhang Cheng's hands while he was cleaning up the dishes. It was obvious that the pendant was a token used by the Harpist Alliance spies to identify each other, while the letter contained information about the magical crystal fragments and himself. Interesting, the Harpist Alliance? I seem to have found a good target to vent on. Zhang Cheng's eyes shot out flames of madness and destruction. He could feel that as time passed, his rationality was becoming more and more fragile. Even his dreams at night were of him slaughtering civilians and destroying towns. Rather than forcefully suppressing it, he might as well find a suitable opportunity to vent. After all, he was destined to be enemies with those who were on the good side in the future. He might as well go all the way and destroy their eyes and ears first. The first step was to use the Arcane Brotherhood to uproot all the Harpist bases around Luskan. He believed that Clinchinian would be more than happy to assist his new master in completing this little game of cat and mouse. Chapter 433. After passing through the dangerous spine of the world, the howling of the wolves and the howling of the wind that lingered in their ears quickly disappeared. What replaced it was a scene of green and thriving life. Needless to say, the tall mountains that ran from east to west not only blocked all kinds of dangerous beasts and monsters in the frozen wasteland, but also blocked the cold air from the south. This made the group feel a lot more relaxed. Occasionally, they could even see caravans and caravans passing by on the road. Even though they set off at dawn every day and set up camp after sunset, it still took them more than 2 weeks to see the tall city wall slowly rising from the horizon. Standing on a small hill, Bruno said to the barbarian who was leaving Icewind Valley for the first time, "That's the city of 1,000 sails. How is it? I didn't disappoint you, did I?" Unbelievable. Wolfgar's eyes widened as he let out an undisguised praise. After all, Luskan was a big city with a population of tens of thousands. There were more than 15,000 houses in the city. At a glance, there were picturesque watchtowers and arrow towers all over the city wall. Many soldiers were patrolling the city wall with weapons and armor in hand. Perhaps it was nothing compared to an extremely prosperous place like Deepwater City, but to an 18-year-old barbarian who had wasted almost all of his life in the Horde and the 10 towns, Luskan was a completely different world. Be careful, my friend. Luskan usually only welcomes merchants. Travelers like us are often turned away. Drizzt pulled his hood, trying to hide himself completely. He clearly knew that if his dark skin was seen by outsiders, it would cause a lot of panic and trouble. Due to their bloodthirsty, evil, and cruel reputation, dark elves were not welcomed at all in the surface world. Many mercenaries and adventurers who saw them did not even need to ask questions. Their first reaction was to draw their weapons and kill them directly. Just as Bruno was about to touch his beard and mutter a few words, Zhang Cheng stood up and said to the nervous ranger, "Since the city gate of Luskan is right in front of us, I think it's time for us to part ways." Part ways? Now, Drizzt raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Of course. I plan to buy a house in the city of 1,000 sails and settle down there. Then I'll join the tower to learn mysterious, magical knowledge. Oh, that's right. As a parting gift, I'll give you these toys. When you encounter danger, all you need to do is throw it out, and it will immediately erupt with dazzling white light and scorching flames. I believe you're not too unfamiliar with this kind of thing." After saying that, Zhang Qing stuffed a small bag of transparent 5-colored glass balls into the dark elf's hands. Then, he led his subordinates to the city gate and said something to the guards. Shortly after, he swaggered into the bustling Luskan. Drizzt let out a sigh of relief as he watched the two of them leave his sight. He took out one of the items from his pouch and muttered to himself, "A magical tool that can release white light and flames. Hey, man, are you sure you want to keep what a dragon gave you?" Blueno asked cautiously. "Don't worry, I know this kind of magical tool as well as I know my scimitar." The Dark Elf Ranger smiled as he comforted his friend. He would never forget how his father, Zaknavan, who was skilled in martial arts, had used these insignificant toys to wantonly slaughter the priests of God Queen Lolth, bringing victory after victory to the evil family. Seeing that the elf was full of confidence, the old dwarf shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "All right, I hope you're right. Go wake up the glutton. We'll enter the city as well." "No, let him sleep a little longer. It's best if we wait until dusk," Drizzt reminded, revealing half his face. "Damn it, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. All right, we should all go to sleep and enter the city at dusk." Blueno instantly recalled the attitude of the surface humans towards dark elves, and a trace of helplessness appeared in his eyes. Although he was already used to having a kind dark elf friend by his side, this didn't mean that outsiders would think the same. At the same time, Zhang Cheng, who was walking on the streets of Luskan, was using a detached gaze to size up this famous pirate city. It had to be said that although the chaotic way of governance, aggressive expansion, and various slave trades had once made this place infamous, for merchants who didn't like to abide by the rules, this place was indeed a heaven-like existence. As long as you had money, you could buy anything you wanted, whether it was a strong warrior, a persevering laborer, or a woman of the opposite sex who could provide endless pleasure in bed. There were even magical potions, weapons, armors, and tools that flowed out of the tower. The audacious pirates not only dared to attack all the human merchant ships in the Swordsea region, they would also occasionally land on land and plunder the elven villages near the coastline. Just a few minutes ago, Zhang Cheng saw a fat merchant buy a young and beautiful elven girl for a high price of 1,000 gold coins. Just as she got into the carriage, ear-piercing screams and struggles sounded from within. Greed, thirst, a desire that came from the depths of the soul. Luskan was like a monster that could never fill its stomach, constantly devouring everything around it. Regrettably, this monster was still a little weak for the time being and was temporarily suppressed by the traditional forces around it. After understanding this, Zhang Cheng's lips curled into a devilish smile as he softly praised, "Let me remove your shackles and awaken the beast in the depths of every intelligent life." "Master, where are we going next?" Ian asked in a low voice. "I'm going to the Wizard Tower. As for you, think of a way to sneak into a pirate ship and become its captain." Zhang Cheng spoke of his plan without hesitation. Everyone knew that Thousand Sail City was jointly ruled by the Arcane Brotherhood and the Pirate Alliance. Although the former had absolute control over the latter, without the latter, it would definitely be a chaotic mess. If he wanted to completely control and transform this city, the pirates were indispensable. He had to have his own people secretly controlling it. Ian wasn't an idiot. He quickly realized his master's plan and bowed deeply. Understood. Please be at ease. In a week at most, I will become the captain of a pirate ship. Very good. Remember, unless it's absolutely necessary, don't take the initiative to contact me. It's very likely that there will be some turmoil in Luskan. What we need to do is to stand by and watch silently. After saying that, flames of madness and destruction burst forth from Zhang Cheng's eyes. He directly took out the shattered magical crystal from his dust-filled pouch and raised it above his head, letting everyone see the dazzling light it emitted. He swaggered towards the entrance of the tower. Chapter 434. Thump, thump, thump. Standing in a room on the top floor of the tower filled with powerful magic power, the leader of the Arcane Brotherhood, Akilam Gris, saw the energy emitted by the broken magic crystal, and his old heart began to beat violently. As an old mage who had relied entirely on wishing spells and life-prolonging potions to barely live to this day, he knew better than anyone else what Clint Sinyon meant. At the same time, the owner of the North Tower, the striped wizard Dandelion Bar, also opened his eyes wide, staring at the light emitted by the broken magic crystal under the sunlight. After a while, he finally recovered from his shock. He gritted his teeth and cursed loudly. Bastard! How dare he show off something that should belong to me in front of everyone? No, I will never allow the broken magic crystal to fall into the hands of outsiders. Obviously, the executioner who had personally murdered the previous owner of the North Tower, the Red Wizard Makai, and who had indirectly shaped the twisted character of Akilam Castle, had long noticed the existence of Clint Sinyon and was eager to take it. Unfortunately, the snowstorm had blocked the connection between Icewind Valley and the outside world, and he had to patiently wait for the end of winter. In fact, just by showing the broken magic crystal, Zhang Cheng had caused the Arcane Brotherhood, which was originally full of conspiracy and betrayal, to surge. The wizards who thirsted for power and power could not resist the temptation of a divine artifact. Soon, under the leadership of Akilam Gris, the owners of the East, South, West, and North Towers left their own territories and stood at the only entrance. He, who was extremely weak, had almost forgotten when was the last time he left the central tower. In order to extend his life, which was nearing the end, he had to temporarily put down the power in his hands and let the internal struggle for power within the organization. But today, he saw an opportunity to get rid of the threat of death. As long as he could get the help of the broken magic crystal, he was fully capable of improving and creating a new, advanced, life-prolonging spell, or directly replacing this body that had lost its vitality. An imperceptible trace of mockery flashed across Zhang Cheng's eyes when he saw the various expressions on the faces of these high-ranking members of the Arcane Brotherhood. He placed a hand on his chest and bowed slightly. Good afternoon, respected adepts. I'm sure you all want to know why I'm here. No, I don't care about your purpose. Just tell me your conditions. Aren't you preparing to use the broken magic crystals as a bargaining chip in a trade? Akilam Gris skipped the part where they were testing each other and went straight to the point. Because he could feel that whether it was the crowd outside or his subordinates behind him, they were all beginning to be tempted by Clint Sinyon's power and were in danger of losing control at any time. That's right. I can give it to the Arcane Brotherhood for free, but in return, you must allow me to become the owner of one of the towers and open all the magic knowledge recorded in the library to me. Zhang Chen calmly made his request. As a dragon of the evil faction, it was impossible for him to obtain what he wanted from spell-casting organizations of the good faction like Silvermoon City and Deepwater City. Moreover, Am's association of masked wizards was too mysterious and rarely recruited members. Candlelight Castle was a good place. As long as you paid, you could obtain the corresponding knowledge. However, if you wanted to complete all your studies there, even robbing the wealth of 10 adult dragons would not be enough. Therefore, the Arcane Brotherhood was the only choice at the moment. Although in terms of background, it was far inferior to Sarah's Red Robe Wizards, but it was enough for Zhang Cheng, who was still in his exploratory period. You want to learn magic here? Akilam Gris's turbid eyes revealed a look of surprise. There was no way he could not be surprised. Perhaps in the eyes of others, The person standing in front of him was just a young human who looked a little strange. However, he had used magic detection earlier and was very clear that the young man in front of him was actually a dragon in disguise. Otherwise, why would he talk nonsense and directly snatch it? Zhang Cheng smiled and nodded. That's right. I'm eager to learn and explore the mysteries of magic, but I don't want to participate in the messy struggle for power and profit. Therefore, the owner of a tower is just enough to satisfy my needs. So what's your answer? Aquilam Gris frowned and hesitated for a moment. Then, he turned around and shot a fatal negative energy at the striped wizard Dendabar. In an instant, this schemer who had once plotted and killed the previous owner of the North Tower suddenly turned pale and fell to the ground without even making a sound. Advanced necromancy spell, Finger of Death. The other 3 tower owners quickly recognized the terrifying spell that had just been cast. Their pupils contracted and dilated violently. They simply could not believe that a competitor who could rival them was so easily killed by the supreme leader of the Arcane Brotherhood. Now, you're the owner of the North Tower. All of Dendabar's rights, wealth, and status are yours to inherit, including his corpse. Aquilam Gris announced in an incomparably gloomy voice. Although he was fully capable of using another relatively peaceful method to deal with the transfer of power, in order to deter his restless subordinates and buy time for himself to study new spells, he deliberately chose the most violent method. Glancing at the corpse on the ground that was completely corroded by negative energy, Zhang Cheng did not hesitate and handed over the shards of magic crystals that were emitting bright light to the other party. He smiled and bowed. Thank you very much. Clint Sinyan is yours. You have made the right choice. On behalf of the Arcane Brotherhood, I welcome you to join us. Remember, you can do anything in your own territory, but you're not allowed to enter the Central Spire without my invitation. Aquilam Gris' tone revealed a strong sense of warning. In fact, he would immediately kill anyone who dared to rush in, no matter who it was. After all, this mage tower that was like a huge tree did not awaken the tower spirit. Whoever controlled the core would be able to control the entire tower. What did it mean to control the mage tower? It meant that one could freely draw on the magical energy that had been accumulated on weekdays and instantly release a large number of terrifying damage spells, such as a large number of fireballs and lightning. Most spellcasters would not be able to withstand such fierce attacks, so he would never allow anyone except himself to get close to the control center. As you wish. Zhang Cheng smiled indifferently, grabbed the corpse on the ground, and disappeared at the end of the stairs leading to the North Tower under everyone's gaze. He believed that when the sky turned dark, the masters of the other 3 towers would secretly gather together to discuss how to seize the shards of magic crystals from Aquilam Gris and overthrow his brutal rule. The shards of magic crystals were obviously very much looking forward to the arrival of destruction and chaos, and would not give the old mage the slightest warning. The moment the assassination was launched, the whole of Luskan would fall into disorder and panic. He only needed to slightly use the chess pieces that he had arranged in advance, and he could easily bring the city under his control. Chapter 435. In the evening, when the afterglow of the sun gradually disappeared from the sea level, several people in gray cloaks gathered in an old warehouse at the wharf, intensely discussing the topic of betrayal and assassination. We can't wait any longer. Once Arkham Gree makes up for the shortcoming of his lifespan, he will definitely purge the entire organization. At that time, no one will have an easy time. A man with a hoarse voice warned sternly. Another woman shook her head with an ugly expression. No, we can't act rashly. I believe you have seen that Arkham Gree's spellcasting ability is far above ours. Any rash action will only lead to death. Death? It's better to fight to the death than to wait for death. The broken magic crystal is a powerful artifact. We must complete the plan before Arkham Gree completely controls it. That's right. I agree. Don't forget that we have already bribed the 2 most trusted followers of Arkham Gree. As long as we kill the assistant who helps him manage the internal affairs of the Spire, then we will have the opportunity to enter his bedroom and launch a precise and fatal surprise attack. I agree. I believe that after he gets the broken magic crystal, he will definitely seize every minute and every second to study spells about prolonging his lifespan. He will not have extra energy to pay attention to what is happening in the organization. So tonight is the best time to act. In that case, we will kill the assistant tonight first. Then within 2 weeks, we will get rid of Arkham Gree. As the last word fell, the masked people who participated in the discussion quickly disappeared without a trace with the help of the power of magic. Apart from each other, no one knew who they were, let alone their positions in the Arcane Brotherhood. But there was one thing. The death of the previous master of the North Tower, the striped wizard Dandelion Bar, made these guys feel an unprecedented threat, so they planned to unite and overthrow Arkham Gree absolute rule over Luskan. In fact, as early as a few years ago, several high-grade wizards have been hiding in the dark to plot. Now, due to the appearance of Clint Cinnabon, they had no choice but to take action in advance. Of course, all this had little to do with Zhang Cheng. As the new master of the North Tower, he was sitting in his own room, flipping through the magic books he borrowed from the library. Among them were Introduction to Planes and the Universe, the discovery and formation of demiplanes, characteristics of elven magic, the difference between arcanists in the Nazrul era and modern mages, in-depth analysis of the weave, and more than 20 dry theories that most mages rarely touched. It had to be said that as a continent that had produced many advanced magic civilizations, Farron's system theory was far more profound and extensive than Azeroth's magic city, Dalaran. After all, from the very beginning, the latter had defined magic as a terrifying power that attracted demons and calamities. He had set up many obstacles in the process of research, fearing that the Burning Legion would invade again or that a second undead calamity would erupt. On the other hand, the former viewed magic as a neutral energy with no inclination towards good or evil. Moreover, powerful spellcasters could travel to other planes or planets in the multiverse through certain advanced teleportation spells. As time passed, different civilizations learned and interacted with each other, just like the Silk Road on Earth. For example, at least 1/3 of the spells with the creator's name in the spellbooks came from a mage organization called 8 Leaves in the Grey Eagle world. Therefore, if Azeroth was a magic civilization that developed in a relatively closed environment, then Farron was a magic world that was born in an open environment through continuous learning and optimization. However, at the end of every glorious magic civilization, there would be a series of terrible disasters that would eventually lead to the loss of a large amount of precious information. Therefore, the magic of Farron was not very developed, and some places were even a little ignorant and backward. However, this did not mean that the once glorious magic civilizations had completely disappeared. On the contrary, the lost civilizations and knowledge were hidden in some corner of the world, waiting for adventurers and ambitious people to discover them. This was also why Zhang Cheng, who had always been a loner, wanted to annex and transform a force. He needed sufficient manpower to help him find the technology and knowledge left behind from the ancient times. Just as he was forcefully suppressing the boiling desire in his mind and was about to seize the time to read the next book, a woman's voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Respected master of the North Tower, I am Sign, an apprentice of the striped magus, Pil Emperor Ba. I have something to discuss with you." "Sign? Come in." Zhang Cheng thought for a moment and quickly recalled a woman with brown hair who was not very beautiful. "Thank you." Just as he had expected, Sign, who was about 25 years old, looked very ordinary. She did not wear any makeup, and there were many freckles on her face. Only a pair of eyes that revealed a strong ambition left a deep impression. She was wearing a gray robe that symbolized her status as an apprentice. She placed one hand on her chest and bowed respectfully. "Good evening, master. I am sorry to disturb your rest so late at night. Tell me, what do you want?" Zhang Cheng closed the book in his hand and looked at the other party with interest. Although he had seen many ambitious women before, most of them were more reserved and preferred to use men to achieve their goals. None of them were as direct and straightforward as Sign. "Respected master of the North Tower, Sign carefully worded her words. But before she could finish, Zhang Chung smiled and interrupted her. You don't have to use honorifics every time. You can call me by my name, Mason Aspirin. All right, Master Mason. Sign pretended to shrug her shoulders helplessly. As you can see, I used to be an apprentice of the striped Magus, Pill Emperor Ba. I used his power to barely get to where I am today. But he died this afternoon, so I need a new mentor. In return, you can have my loyalty and everything. Oh, you want to be my apprentice? Zhang Chung showed a playful smile. Yes, maybe you don't know, but a few hours ago, there were many people who were secretly colluding with each other. They want to take the position of the master of the North Tower before you have a firm foothold. And I can help you get through this crisis. Sign raised her head, her eyes shining with a strong desire for power. Needless to say, she did not know who the young man sitting on the chair was. She just wanted to use this chaos to get more benefits for herself. Help me. Ha ha. Zhang Chung seemed to have heard a funny joke and laughed without restraint. Chapter 436. Let go. I can't breathe. Sydney felt that the arms around her neck were like two iron pincers. No matter how hard she struggled, she could not break free. Without a doubt, this was not the strength and physique that an ordinary spellcaster could possess. It had even far exceeded the limits of what an ordinary human could achieve. Tell me, who is it that wants to plot against me? Zhang Chung did not let go, and instead tightened his grip. The strong urge to destroy everything that he had suppressed with great difficulty surged into his mind once again. Blood, crimson red blood. Only death and destruction could calm his restless mind. It's Delta Gel Zelenda. He secretly instigated the Magi of the Three Radiances to launch an assassination attempt after midnight. Sydney used the little air left in her lungs to speak of everything she knew. Delta Gel Zelenda, the master of the Eastern Tower. The corners of Zhang Cheng's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a cruel and callous smile. At the same time, he let go of his right hand. Even though he had yet to conduct a systematic investigation of the internal forces of the Arcane Brotherhood, he was very clear on who was a threat to him in this tall tower that looked like a withered tree. Delta Gel Zelenda was one of them. This fellow was one of the few top mages who could cast level 9 spells, and was also one of the main conspirators to overthrow Keelan Griss's rule. It was obvious that he had chosen to act at this crucial moment. On one hand, it was to probe, and on the other hand, it was to distract the attention of Keelan Griss's loyal subordinates. Cough, cough, cough. Sydney coughed violently on the ground. Through the mirror hanging on the wall, she could clearly see the red and purple handprint on her neck. She knew that she had just walked through the gates of hell, and her whole body trembled involuntarily. Looking at this frightened magic apprentice, Zhang Chung seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He slowly took out a bottle of magic potion that emitted a silver radiance from his magic pouch, as well as the breathtakingly beautiful tear of the Queen of the Deep. With a faint smile, he said, "Since you want to be my apprentice, then I'll fulfill your request. But before that, you have to pass my test, or rather, help me complete a small experiment." Experiment. No, let me go. Losing her head out of fear, Sydney couldn't care less about her image. She turned around and ran out of the door. She was not an idiot. She knew what the so-called experiment meant. Every year, there were at least 80 apprentices who died under the various experiments of their mentors. This is not up to you to refuse. With the terrifying strength of a giant dragon, Zhang Chung effortlessly trapped the woman in the house, pinching her chin and forcing the magical potion into her mouth. In the blink of an eye, Sydney, who had been constantly resisting, suddenly calmed down. Her pupils rapidly dilated as she stood there quietly, as if she was a soulless zombie. Awesome. I hope we don't fail this time. Zhang Chung nodded with satisfaction. Then, he gently placed the azure tear of the Queen of the Deep on the woman's forehead. In an instant, this sphere, which was completely composed of pure energy, began to release a resplendent light. In less than a minute, it began to dissolve slowly, seeping into the skin and blood through the pores. About 30 seconds later, Sydney's body began to undergo strange changes. First, her freckled skin began to rapidly dry and fall off, and new, white, tender skin grew out. Her pupils also gradually turned from brown to dark blue. Next, for some reason, her hair was slowly covered by a kind of seaweed-like green, and there was also a trace of indescribable, surging vitality. Finally, and most importantly, there was a layer of faintly discernible webbing between her fingers and toes. Her body also showed an unusually beautiful curve. Without a doubt, the tear of the Queen of the Deep had forcefully transformed Sydney from a human into a hybrid between a human and a water elemental life form. It could be said that not only had she turned from an ugly duckling into a white swan, her every movement was filled with a strange seduction, like a mental charm spell. Interesting. Is this the true use of the tear of the Queen of the Deep? Zhang Cheng stroked his chin, his face full of curiosity. He didn't understand at all why this thing would only work on females, or more accurately, pure virgins. The effect of the potion just now was to completely erase the female apprentice's memories temporarily, returning her to the state of a newborn. An infant without any sense of right or wrong would naturally be able to successfully deceive the identification marker left in this ball of pure energy. Just as he was about to draw some blood for further research, the effects of the magic potion finally wore off. Sydney suddenly woke up with a start and stared at herself in the mirror with wide eyes. She asked in a panic, "What did you do to me? Why did I become like this?" "Don't be nervous. I only gave you a small gift. Close your eyes and use your heart to feel the power flowing through your veins. Then tell me, what do you feel?" Zhang Cheng calmly reminded her. I feel power. The power of water. The power of the ocean." Sydney waved her hands aimlessly. Soon, a ball of clear water appeared in the room out of thin air, constantly changing its shape. After a full 5 minutes, she opened her eyes again and shouted in ecstasy, "From today onwards, the water everywhere will obey my orders." Just as she finished speaking, the skin in the air suddenly surged toward Zhang Cheng's position, as if it was going to wrap him up from top to bottom. "You overestimate yourself," Zhang Cheng sneered, raising his hand and lightly snapping his fingers. "Pa!" A ball of scorching flame immediately shot out from his fingers, evaporating all the water on the spot into white mist. Apart from that, Sydney's body also couldn't maintain its human form for some reason, slowly dissolving from her feet. No, I was wrong. Please forgive me for my rudeness. Great Master, I am willing to become your servant and eliminate all threats for you." She knelt on the ground and begged bitterly. Zhang Cheng walked closer and reached out his right hand to gently caress the female acolyte's smooth cheeks, saying meaningfully, "Remember, Sydney, this is the first time, and I hope it will be the last. If you dare to show off your pitiful cleverness again, I promise that death will only be the beginning of your suffering. Get up now. Help me capture those idiots who conspired to launch the assassination. It's best if you capture them alive." "Understood. Your will is my command." Sydney noticed that her dissolving legs had returned to normal, and she hurriedly nodded her head. Chapter 437. Wow, my dear apprentice, you've changed so much that I can't recognize you. Can you tell me what just happened inside? Sydney had just left the private room of the North Tower Master when a female moon elf mage with long silver hair blocked her path. It had to be said that in an evil spellcaster's organization that was filled with treachery, cunning, and selfish thoughts, it was quite puzzling for a kind race like the moon elves to appear. However, Sydney was very clear that this seemingly beautiful and harmless female elf was not only extremely dangerous. In order to quickly complete her mission, she never minded sending her allies or subordinates to their deaths. Moreover, she often used the advantages of her race to deceive ignorant adventurers, causing them to unknowingly make irreparable mistakes. Perhaps she felt threatened, or perhaps it was a subconscious reaction, but she took a step back and replied with two deep blue eyes, "I'm sorry, Miss Valindra. I'm not too sure what happened." You should ask the North Tower Master yourself. Oh, you're not aware of the changes that happen to your body? The moon elf called Valindra revealed a surprised expression. As an arcane spellcaster who was deeply in contact with the weave and could cast level 5 spells, she did not need to use any detection magic to detect the dense water elemental energy surrounding the other party. Under normal circumstances, only the blessings of the gods or powerful water elemental life forms would be able to reach such a level. I really don't know. Also, I have some problems to deal with. If you don't have anything else, I'll take my leave first. Saying that, Sydney placed one hand on her chest and bowed slightly. She quickly covered her delicate face with her hood and disappeared at the end of the corridor leading to the public rest area. Watching her gradually fading figure, Valindra pursed her lips and a playful expression appeared on her face. She muttered to herself, "Interesting. Looks like the new North Tower Master isn't, as the rumors say, a mere opportunist from the outside. Perhaps I should try to pay him a visit." There was no hesitation. This moon elf, with a personality completely different from her compatriots, went straight to the North Tower Master's private room upstairs and lightly knocked on the door. Asterisk bang, bang, bang. Asterisk, who's there? Zhang Cheng's impatient voice sounded through the crack in the door. I am Valindra, the person in charge of the Northern Intelligence Network. The female elf answered calmly. Just as she was about to push open the door and enter the room, Zhang Cheng, who had been silent for a few seconds, suddenly rejected her. I'm not interested in information about the northern lands for the time being. You can leave now. Leave? Are you sure you don't want to invite me in? You should know that the Arcane Brotherhood isn't very peaceful right now. It won't be long before a storm engulfs the entire tower. When that time comes, no one will be able to stay out of it. Valindra had no intention of leaving at all. On the contrary, he kept hinting at them meaningfully. Oomph. He thought he was clever. Since you want to come in, then come in, but please don't regret it. As the last word left his mouth, the closed door suddenly opened a crack with a creak. Because it was nighttime, it was pitch black inside, without the slightest bit of light. Valindra, who sensed the strange atmosphere, hesitated for a moment before finally stepping over the threshold and entering the dark room. Just as she was about to use the dark vision unique to elves to survey the surroundings, a huge shadow moved towards the door and blocked the only exit to the outside world. Following that, a bright flame appeared out of thin air, reigniting the extinguished candlesticks. With the help of the weak candlelight, Valindra finally saw an unforgettable scene. In the spacious living room, a black dragon that was 18 meters long and close to 10 meters tall had its head lowered. It was crouching on the expensive handmade carpet, staring at her with two burning eyes. If not for the fact that she hadn't prepared a teleportation spell today, she would definitely have escaped without hesitation. How is it? Do you regret it? I warned you just now. Zhang Cheng, in his dragon form, opened his mouth and mocked her with a nasty attitude. Gulp! Valindra subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She resisted the urge to immediately turn and run. She bowed respectfully and stuttered as she explained, I'm very sorry. I didn't expect you to be. You didn't expect me to be a dragon, did you? Zhang Cheng asked as he practiced using the little claws on his wings to wield his magic wand. It had to be said that dragons were indeed the top magical creatures in many fantasy worlds. Be in terms of physique or magical talent, they were far more outstanding than humans. Furthermore, they could use the two claws on their wings to activate their magic wands and scrolls during battle, not affecting their normal battle and spellcasting at all. Of course, the prerequisite was that there had to be a certain degree of connection. Otherwise, if one didn't control their strength well, it would be easy for them to break the magic wand or tear apart the fragile scrolls. Yes, I don't understand why a powerful creature like you would give away the divine weapon, the magical crystal fragments. Seeing that the other party had no intention of killing her, Valindra quickly calmed down and began to carefully probe. Admiring the intense desire in the moon elf's eyes, Zhang Cheng suddenly took a step forward without warning. He stopped his large head less than 10 centimeters away from her and revealed a sinister smile. It's simple. I've taken a fancy to the arcane brotherhood and Luskin, and have decided to make them my own. Hearing this answer, Valindra's pupils contracted violently, and she stood stiffly on the spot. It was only after a full minute that she asked with a trembling voice, You want to usurp the arcane brotherhood and Luskin's authority? That's right. Otherwise, why do you think I took out the magical crystal fragments? Someone taught me a long time ago that if you want to seize authority from the bottom, you have to create chaos. What could cause more chaos and turmoil than an assassination attempt on a top leader? I believe that there are already many senior mages in the organization who are itching to make a move and are already plotting to assassinate Arklam. After saying that, Zhang Cheng raised his sharp dragon claws and gently stroked the silver hair of the moon elf that flowed like a waterfall. This should have been an extremely intimate action, but not only did it not make Valindra feel intimate, it even made her shudder. She knew that if those sharp claws used a little bit more force, she would immediately die on the spot. Thus, she bit her lower lip tightly. Why are you telling me this? You need to make a small choice now. Become my subordinate, or become my enemy. Zhang Cheng didn't have the intention to beat around the bush and directly expressed his attitude. Chapter 438. Do I have a second choice? My respected master. After thinking for a moment, Valindra's lips curled into a smile that would make most men's hearts flutter. As a moon elf who was born in the Supreme Forest and had lived for more than 100 years, she had once received traditional magic education in her hometown. However, she soon felt that the slow, elven education had curbed her talent, so she came to the human world and used her beauty to bewitch an old mage. However, after just a year, she killed her mentor and seized all of his important assets, including spellbooks and a large number of magical items. She was then noticed by the Arcane Brotherhood and took the initiative to join them as an agent. Because of these unique experiences, she was not at all willing to succumb to powerful forces and silently wait for an opportunity to strike back. Unfortunately, she was afraid that she would miscalculate today. Zhang Cheng, who was severely insecure, did not trust anyone, especially in the Faron continent where betrayal was as common as eating and drinking. Thus, he did not hesitate and handed a bottle of magic potion to Valindra. Drink it. Do not try to use spells to prevent your digestive system from absorbing it. Valindra's expression changed slightly. She took the potion and forcefully suppressed the panic in her heart, asking softly, "What is this?" A blessing and a gift. At the same time, it is also an insurance. I have my own unique understanding and definition of loyalty. What you need to do is to obey, and obey. Please remember, I hate underlings who play tricks. With that, 2 balls of suffocating heat came out of Zhang Cheng's nose. As you wish. The moon elf struggled for a few seconds in her heart. In the end, she clenched her teeth and pulled out the cork, drinking the liquid in the bottle in one go. She wasn't an idiot. She knew that she didn't have the right to bargain at the moment. Although there were several known spells that could prevent the potion from being absorbed, considering the possible serious consequences, she still obediently let the potion flow down her esophagus into her stomach. In the blink of an eye, an intense burning sensation that could not be described with words appeared. It was like a ball of raging flames that quickly spread throughout her body through her bloodstream. After about a minute, the surface of her skin started to turn red and hot. Her itchy throat made her cough violently, as if something was about to break out of her body. Pain. Unparalleled pain. Valindra widened his eyes and stared at himself in the mirror. Soon, he saw black scales growing on his smooth skin. His hands and legs turned into sharp claws, and a thick tail even lifted up his mage robe. A pair of sword-shaped horns also appeared on his forehead. Dragonians. Having read countless books related to magic, she immediately realized what the changes in her body meant. But what puzzled the female elf was that draconids usually only had a very low chance of being born from a union of a male giant dragon and a female humanoid creature. She had never heard of it being achieved through magical potions. In addition, she also felt that there was a special organ under her throat. With just a thought, She could make hot flames spurt out of her mouth. How do you feel? Looking at the second draconid that he had created in this world, Zhangqing finally let down his guard. A faint smile appeared on his ferocious face. The reason was simple. The technology he used to create potions mainly came from the Black Dragon King Nefarian in the world of Azeroth. At the same time, he also used the blood that flowed in his body. Therefore, even though draconids could retain their original memories, personalities, and ways of thinking, they would never be able to go against their master's orders, even if the order was to die. Of course, because there were countless powerful magic powers and gods on the continent of Faerun, there was the possibility that a few draconids could break free. But at least, compared to the binding force that was completely dependent on oaths, power, and common interests, it was undoubtedly several levels safer. He intended to use the technology of transforming draconids to complete absolute control over the Arcane Brotherhood and the entire Luskan. He wanted to end the original chaotic management and become an extremely powerful and efficient force. However, it was not easy to achieve this, especially since the creation of the Dragon Blood Potion required the consumption of red and blue crystals. Currently, there were only about 100 bottles in his magic backpack. Feeling the power and life force that came from his new body, Valindra shouted excitedly, "Awesome! I've never felt so good before. Thank you for your generosity, my great and benevolent master. I swear that all the obstacles in your way will be mercilessly destroyed in the end." "Very good. You can leave now. Help me take note of who in the tower is worth roping in. For the next grand plan, we need many talents." After saying this, Zhang Cheng moved his body and opened the only path to the outside world. "Understood. I'll give you a name list later." Valindra controlled the power of his bloodline and slowly returned to his human form. He bowed and disappeared at the end of the dim passage. She could not wait to return to her room and try out the new power that she had just obtained, so much so that she neglected the changes in her mental state. Not long ago, she was still thinking about how to break free from being controlled by others. But now, she was full of joy and desire to eliminate all potential threats for her master. "I really hope that chaos and slaughter can come quickly. Otherwise, I won't be able to control myself." Zhang Cheng, who was left in the room, took a deep breath and muttered to himself in a low voice. Chapter 439. With the help of a senior apprentice who was familiar with the internal affairs of the Arcane Brotherhood, the rebellion in the North Tower was quickly suppressed. To be more precise, before the few mages who had been bribed could discuss how to get rid of Zhang Cheng without leaving any traces, their mouths and noses were blocked by a stream of water that appeared out of thin air. They quickly suffocated and fell into a deep coma. When they woke up, they found themselves in the private room of the Tower Master. All the magical items on them had disappeared, and their fingers had been smashed off. They could not cast any spells at all. "Ah, you're finally awake." Zhang Cheng, who had returned to his human form, stood in front of the alchemy table and mixed a black liquid that emitted a faint burnt smell. He turned his head and smiled like a scientist looking at a lab rat. "Damn it, what are you trying to do? Let us go. Otherwise, Master Deltagel Zelinda will not let you go." The two middle-aged mages who felt the dangerous aura could not help but shout loudly. Needless to say, they were trying to use the name of the mastermind behind this to get out of their current predicament. At the very least, they had to save their own lives first. "Relax, don't be nervous. I'm only inviting you to do a little magic experiment." Zhang Cheng ignored their loss of composure and continued to add some unknown powder into the black liquid. From time to time, he would flip through a tattered notebook at the side. Written in the common language were various theories and conjectures regarding the transformation of a spellcaster into an undead form, a lich. Since the Arcane Brotherhood didn't have a true lich, they didn't have any knowledge in this area. Most of the information was collected by Arklam Gris, the supreme leader of the Arcane Brotherhood. Some of it was his own speculation, and no one knew if it would work. After all, everyone only had one life, especially the mages who enjoyed supreme privileges in Luskan. They did not dare to play around with their own lives. Thus, no one knew if the ritual would be able to transform a veteran spellcaster into a powerful lich. Not far away, Sydney stared at the boiling black liquid in the glass beaker in awe. She asked carefully, "Master, do you need me to shut their mouths?" "No, no need. They won't be alive for long anyway." Zhang Cheng deliberately emphasized the word alive. When the black liquid in the beaker began to turn transparent, he quickly divided it into 3 small portions according to the number of people. He then picked up 3 raw diamonds that had not yet been polished and brought them to the front of the captives. "You are all mages. I believe I don't need to explain more to you to understand the content of this experiment. Now, I will use the power of the Wizard Tower to activate these gems and turn them into phylacteries. You will drink the potion of immortality. If you succeed, you will be successfully converted into liches and become my servants. If you fail, you will die completely and become meaningless corpses." "You crazy? You're crazy. It's impossible." One of the mages retreated like a madman. After all, the lich transformation ritual was a very complicated and dangerous thing. The slightest mistake could lead to a tragic death. Otherwise, Arklam Gris would not have dragged his old body for so many years without putting it into practice. And instantly, a blinding white light hit the 3 diamonds in his hand. Because it was an experiment, he had no intention of creating a real phylactery. He wasn't the one who was going to be turned into a lich anyway. Whether the phylactery was strong enough to withstand the attacks of powerful weapons and magic was not something he had considered from the start. Feeling the strong magical energy coming from the diamonds, the captives realized that this was not a joke. Their eyes were filled with fear, and they forced themselves not to reject the ritual. It was common knowledge that the lich transformation ritual had to be completely voluntary. Otherwise, it would most likely lead to a disastrous outcome. Of course, the genius mage, Samaster, had invented another method of transformation that no one knew about. It did not require the consent of the person who turned a giant dragon into a Dracolic. He had even founded a terrifying organization called the Dracolic Cult. Seeing the strong desire to live in the eyes of the 3 mages, Zhang Cheng nodded in satisfaction. He quickly connected the diamonds to their souls, and then gave a look to the female apprentice not far away. Sydney did not hesitate at all, and immediately hooked her finger. The 3 portions of black liquid quickly entered the mages' stomachs through their nostrils, not even giving them a chance to swallow. The next second, the mages began to convulse violently, and in the blink of an eye, their faces turned green as they breathed their last. There was no doubt that they had been killed by the poison contained in the potion of immortality. All they had to do now was wait patiently. About a few seconds later, one of the diamonds shattered out of thin air, and a faint negative energy quickly emerged from the corresponding corpse. "Damn it, this failed." Zhang Cheng shook his head in disappointment as he wiped the diamond powder off his robes. According to the notes, those who drank the potion and had their phylacteries shattered on the spot meant that the transformation ritual had failed. Their corpses would be reborn after 30 days, and they would become trash with the same abilities as a real lich, but without any memories or intelligence. In less than half a minute, another diamond shattered into powder. Just as Zhang Cheng began to suspect that there was a problem with the notes, the last corpse began to rot rapidly, emitting a foul stench. At the same time, the diamond that was the phylactery began to emit a brilliant magical light. Oh! One of them actually succeeded. He raised the diamond in his hand, a playful expression on his face. Master, you created a lich?" Sydney's eyes widened, her voice filled with disbelief and surprise. After all, Arklam Gris had tried to transform himself into an undead form a few years ago, but for some reason, he had chosen to give up at the last moment. This was no secret within the Arcane Brotherhood. But now, someone had actually succeeded on the first try. Although 2 had failed, a success rate of 1/3 was definitely enough for those old mages who were nearing the end of their lives to muster up the courage to fight to the death. "Don't make such a fuss. I need 6 days to confirm whether or not it was a success." Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged. In fact, the reason he could concoct the potion of immortality was all thanks to the alchemy stone he had brought from Earth. It was this stone that had helped him complete the most difficult part of the potion, the transformation process from life to death. Chapter 440. Greetings, respected master of the North Tower. My name is Gildan, and I am honored to have an audience with you. The moment the low-ranked officer wearing the standard armor of Luskan entered, he immediately placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. As an ambitious middle-aged man, he knew very well where the true power of this city came from. It wasn't those high and mighty commanders who usually pretended to be high and mighty, nor was it the Pirate Alliance who came and went like the wind. It was the stone tree tower that stood on the island at the mouth of the river. Adepts with powerful magical powers could order the great commander and the Pirate Alliance around like slaves. Until now, no one had dared to disobey the orders of the Arcane Brothers, even if these orders would cause them great losses. Thus, he desired to curry favor with the adepts who held supreme authority in Luskan, in exchange for a higher position and authority in the army. Zhang Chung sat on the chair, sizing up the other party. After a while, he asked, "Then tell me, Gildan, what kind of service did you provide for Dundee Ba?" "It's information, my lord. I have spies all over Luskan, and I am quick to identify and monitor all who enter the city, whether by land or sea. In fact, I was following Dundee Ba's orders, secretly observing a group of adventurers who came from Icewind Valley. Among them were powerful barbarians, skilled dark elves, irascible dwarves, and an interesting halfling." Gildan carefully described his value. Because he had received a warning from Sydney before entering this room, he didn't dare to play any of his usual tricks, especially when he found out that Sydney, under the influence of some unknown magic, had turned from an unattractive female apprentice into a stunner that could make any man's heart beat faster. His heart was filled with reverence and fear. "Oh, are you tracking Drizzt?" Zhang Chung stroked his chin with interest. Without a doubt, he remembered who this middle-aged officer in front of him was. At the same time, he also remembered that this was the first time this person had made contact with the famous assassin, Entreri. "Yes, my lord. The dead Dundee Ba believed that the Dark Elves were hiding a powerful magical item, and I've been helping him track them down." Gildan gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. After all, the last person he was loyal to was already dead, so there was no need for him to keep this a secret. "Very good. Continue to help me keep an eye on their movements. If ever you find a man named Artemis Entreri, bring him to me at once. As a reward, I will bestow upon you a very precious gift." With that, Zhang Chung gently waved his hand, indicating that the other party could leave. "Thank you very much." Although Gildan didn't quite understand what was going on in the young mage's mind, today's interaction was undoubtedly a good start. After watching the officer disappear at the end of the corridor, Sydney, who had been standing motionlessly in place, suddenly asked, "Master, I don't understand. Since the magical crystals are no longer in the hands of the Dark Elves, why are you still paying attention to the movements of these country bumpkins?" "Huh, have you heard of Mithril Hall?" Zhang Chung asked out of the blue. "The dwarven kingdom that was rumored to have been destroyed? The huge mithril mine that was said to contain a stream of silver?" Sydney had obviously heard of the legend of Mithril Hall and subconsciously furrowed her brows. Zhang Chung narrowed his eyes and nodded lightly. "That's right. As far as I know, the goal of Drizzt's group is to help their friend, the dwarf Bruno, find the homeland of the Warhammer family." "I still don't understand. What does their search for Mithril Hall have to do with you? Could it be that you intend to seize this underground mine?" The female apprentice raised her head and glanced at her master from the corner of her eyes. "Seize? No, I don't need to seize at all. You probably don't know, but Mithril Hall has been occupied by a black dragon named Shuoying for over 100 years. The gray dwarves under him have long since excavated and refined an inexhaustible supply of mithril. I only need to wait for them to find the entrance, then seize all the treasures and make the gray dwarves work for me." Zhang Chung had no intention of hiding anything, and openly spoke of the plan in his heart. According to the memories in his mind, he knew that from the discovery of the entrance to Mithril Hall to the formation of an allied army, to expel the gray dwarves and restore Bruno's rightful position as king, it had taken half a year. This also meant that before the Allied army was truly formed and launched an attack, he had enough time to empty out the underground treasure and even plunder the entire mine. With the deadly flames of the dragon's breath, he only needed a few weeks to melt the ore that would have taken years to mine. I understand now. Sydney noticed that as he spoke, Zhang Cheng's eyes shone with a chilling madness. She decisively gave up on pursuing the matter and quickly turned to leave the room. As an apprentice who had once tried her best to obtain the title of Magus, she had already seen the terrifying strength and methods of this terrifying master who had almost changed her fate. There was no longer a trace of hope in her heart. At the same time, in the public resting area at the lower level of the central spire, Keelam Griss's most trusted assistant, Jade Fire Mage, had already turned into an ice-cold corpse. Before he died, there was still an expression of disbelief and shock on his face. It was as if he had never dreamed that the closest follower of his master would stab him in the back with a dagger enchanted with magic nullification. As soon as the protective spell was triggered, it was dispelled by the enchanted dagger. Oomph. As expected, a perfect assassination. Keelam Griss was completely unaware. One of the masterminds sneered sarcastically. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and clean up the corpse. Check. We need you to use a transformation spell to temporarily disguise this guy for a few days. Another mastermind quickly gave a series of orders. Understood. The middle-aged man called Check wasted no time and immediately chanted an incantation. In a short while, he transformed into the corpse on the ground. In order to prevent any flaws, he even stripped the corpse of its clothes, rings, amulets, and boots. Then, he put them on one by one and used magic to repair the holes and bloodstains on the robe. Keelam Griss would never have dreamed that he had just obtained the broken magic crystals in the afternoon, and that a conspiracy against him had already begun in the evening. But regrettably, he, who had wholeheartedly devoted himself to controlling the broken magic crystals and researching life-prolonging spells, simply did not have the spare energy to pay attention to the internal turmoil of the organization. He also did not know that the main tower had already been invaded by the conspirators. Chapter 441. The rebellion in the central spire was quick and secretive, to the point that most people didn't even know what was going on before it was over. By the time the sun rose, everything had returned to normal. At the very least, it didn't seem any different on the surface. However, if one were to do a careful head count, they would discover that a portion of people had mysteriously disappeared from every single spire. The North Tower had the least, while the East Tower had the most. Most of the people who had disappeared had taken on the appearance of someone else. They stayed in the public area of the Central Spire, patiently waiting for an opportunity to assassinate the leader of the Arcane Brotherhood, Keelam Griss. They clearly knew that this old, weak, and powerful spellcaster would ask his most trusted assistant to send a small amount of food into his private room every once in a while. So, he would definitely come out to solve the most basic physiological needs, excretion. Every few days, or at most a week or two, he would come out to solve the most basic physiological needs, excretion. This was when the old mage was at his weakest, and also the best time to deal a fatal blow. As a divine tool with independent thoughts and spiritual probing abilities, Clintonbin had undoubtedly detected all sorts of thoughts of chaos and betrayal. However, he didn't alert his wielder. Instead, he held onto an expectant attitude, wanting to see the arrival of this rebellion. After all, Keelam Griss, who was nearing the end of his life, wasn't someone who could be easily controlled. As such, he wanted to find a new wielder as soon as possible, one who was more ambitious, younger, and full of desires. As the instigator of all this, Zhang Cheng didn't take the initiative to contact the other 3 Tower Masters, nor did he prepare to inform the leader of the Arcane Brotherhood. After completing his purge and control of the North Tower, he silently closed the door and hungrily absorbed the tens of thousands of books in the library. Among them were arcane techniques used by mages, warlocks, and bards, as well as divine techniques used by priests and druids. There were even some messy notes and maps regarding the history, geography, and legends of this continent. In short, To prevent himself from losing control, Zhang Qing desperately stuffed his brain with endless knowledge. Occasionally, he would take the time to rope in the outstanding talents recommended by Valindra. In just a few short days, 4 unknown dragonborn mages had silently appeared in the tower. Even the weakest of them could unleash a 5th ring arcana technique, while the strongest could even unleash a 7th ring arcana technique. Each of them controlled a massive information network, as well as several low-tier mages and a dozen or so apprentices. Since the owners of the East, West, and South steeples were all focused on the central steeple, they did not notice the infiltration at all. Just as Zhang Cheng used the vast amount of theoretical knowledge to convert the Azeroth Mage class template into the spell-casting level of this world, the assassin he had been waiting for finally appeared. "My lord, I have found Artemis on Trary, but for some reason, he doesn't want to get close to the tower. Instead, he wants to meet you at a tavern in the dock area." Gildan, who had entered the private room for the second time, reported in a low voice. Unlike last time, there was an obvious line of blood on his neck caused by a sharp weapon. Needless to say, this veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles had suffered a great loss in this sudden encounter, so it was inevitable that there was a trace of resentment in his tone. "Oh, which tavern?" Zhang Cheng put down the spellbook he was working on and turned his head to ask with great interest. After completing the conversion of the Mage class template, he could already memorize and cast 6 circle arcana spells. In this world, he was probably between level 12 and 13. Of course, this level did not take into account the knowledge and power he had obtained from the memories of the demon Irida. To be more precise, he had not had the time to integrate these complex contents into his new magic system. Furthermore, due to the unique weave system of the Faron continent, he had to have a spellbook that belonged to him. The reason was simple. In order to memorize and cast more spells, spellcasters had long ago invented a special technique called temporary memory. They would allocate the magic stored in their body into different memory slots according to a certain ratio, and then adjust the spells they had mastered according to their needs every day. Once a spell was successfully cast, the spell would be completely erased from the spellcaster's mind. Only after sufficient rest could the spellbook be used to memorize the spell again. In other words, without a spellbook, the spellcasters in this world would lose the power they were so proud of once they cast their last spell. But at the same time, with this unique spellcasting technique, the spellcasters were far more proficient than the spellcasters of Azeroth, whether it was the number of spells they had mastered or the number of spells they could cast. In particular, there were several supreme magic skills, including silent spell casting, continuous spell casting, delay spell casting, fixed spell casting, maximizing spell casting, enhancing spell casting, increasing spell casting, extending spell casting, increasing spell range, increasing spell casting, instantaneous spell casting, and so on. They could greatly increase the power of spells in battle, making strategies and tactics more complicated and unpredictable. In short, a smart spellcaster would not only use powerful magic to crush the enemy, but also learn to integrate the surrounding terrain, environment, climate, temperature, and many other factors. With a variety of supreme magical techniques, the spellcaster could directly force the enemy to suffer a crushing defeat without being able to retaliate. For Zhang Cheng, who thirsted for power and knowledge, this world was simply a huge treasure trove. If it wasn't for the whispers and crazy thoughts of the ancient gods echoing his mind, he would definitely find a safe place to concentrate on his own research, completely ignoring the changes in the outside world. But unfortunately, the owner of the parchment saw through his personality flaw, so he set a trap, forcing him to have no choice but to come into contact with the outside world. Gildan obviously didn't know how dangerous and dark the heart of this seemingly harmless young man in front of him was. He casually handed over a piece of paper and said, "This is the address. I've already personally observed it. It's a very messy place. If something unexpected happens, he can easily create chaos and escape. In addition, he also brought a young and beautiful girl with him. She looks like a hostage or a captive." "Very good. You've done a good job. Take it. It's your reward. Later, I'll send someone to talk to the chief commander of the North Gate and make you the highest-ranking commander of the North Gate. With that, Zhang Cheng threw a small bottle of Evolution Potion version 20 to Gildan. This was a new product that he modified according to the native humans of Farron Continent. He removed most of the things that could easily cause atavism and only kept the part that could control anger. No matter what, Farron Continent was a world that was exposed to a large amount of magic energy, so it was inevitable that ordinary people would absorb and store some of the energy during their growth. This was also why professional warriors who had undergone training in battles were often stronger, more powerful, and more agile than ordinary people. Some of them even had magic resistance and strong self-recovery abilities like trolls. Chapter 442. The tavern was a place filled with all kinds of noise, turbid air, and the most primitive and direct attraction between men and women. Although there were at least 7 or 8 taverns in Luskan, as a big city, none of them were as lively as the docks. Even though a frightening group brawl had occurred here not too long ago, to the point that even the bartender and the boss were split open. Even now, they had no choice but to be wrapped in thick bandages to serve the customers. However, the sailors were completely unconcerned about this point. They continued to gather together to drink cheap alcohol. There are even some who negotiated with the heavily made-up women before entering the expensive rooms upstairs to engage in a fierce brawl. If the entire Luskan was a city of desire, then this tavern would be a miniature version. But today, there were 2 strange customers in the tavern. One of them was wrapped in a black cloak, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He didn't order any alcohol at all, and only ordered a bowl of seafood soup and 2 pieces of bread. As for the other one, she was a young lady with beautiful long brown hair. Not only was her face beautiful, but her figure was also quite curvy. She was completely incomparable to those street girls who relied on cheap perfume and disguises to arouse men's desire. Normally, such a pure and beautiful lady would be the fuse that triggered riots and violent incidents, especially those who drank until they were delirious and had high hormones. They would definitely not be able to resist the urge to approach and harass her. But what was interesting was that after 2 hooligans who tried to touch the girl's ample breasts and thighs had their palms pierced by a sharp dagger, no one dared to find trouble. No one who made a living on the sea was truly an idiot. They all sensed that the man sitting next to the girl was emitting a murderous aura. If anyone dared to be insensible, the dagger wouldn't pierce their palms, but their throats. This wasn't the usual street brawls, nor was it a violent incident caused by fighting over territory between gangs. This was a true massacre, a massacre that didn't involve any benefits, but only for the sake of interest and hobbies. Clearly, the mysterious man with the hood covering his face was enjoying the sight of his opponents lying at his feet in pain, enjoying the thrill of blood spurting out from their throats. Therefore, everyone was afraid. Perhaps they dared to challenge a strong warrior, but they would never dare to challenge an executioner hiding in the shadows. For a moment, the atmosphere in the tavern became oppressive and heavy. The sailors who were usually unbridled subconsciously lowered their voices, afraid of angering this malefic who had come out of nowhere. Without a doubt, this strange duo was the famous Artemis Entreri Bruno's adopted human daughter, Caddy Brie. Eat! The assassin pushed the seafood soup and a piece of bread on the table to the girl beside him. His words were simple and clear as always, without the slightest bit of nonsense. No! Filled with rage, Caddy Brie flipped open the bowl of soup and glared at her opponent. Even though she hadn't eaten for a long time, she still couldn't help but test the assassin. Slap Artemis Entreri, who had no compassion for the fairer sex, raised his hand and sent the girl tumbling to the ground with a slap, his whole body radiating a strong killing intent. Just as Caddy Brie thought she was dead for sure, a teasing voice came from the entrance of the tavern. Whoa. Beating up a woman who can't fight back isn't something a gentleman should do. 2 young men dressed as adepts walked in, led by an officer in Luskan's standard armor. "My lord, it's him," Gildan whispered into his ear. "Isn't it obvious?" The corners of Zhang Cheng's mouth curled into a playful smile. He walked up to Caddy Brie unhurriedly, bent down, and took her hand. He gently helped this young lady, who would have a series of emotional entanglements with Drizzt in the future up. He then comforted her, as if no one else was around. "Relax, cute girl. With me here, no one can hurt you." You are." Caddy Bree seemed to have sensed something, and an expression of shock and fear appeared on her face. Even though this was technically the first time the two had met, she had been listening to her adoptive father Bruno and her good friend Drizzt talk about strange black dragons all winter. Thus, it didn't take her much effort to recognize the young man in front of her. "Shoo, please keep quiet and sit down to eat something, my little cutie." Zhang Cheng raised his right index finger and placed it on her lips, at the same time snapping his fingers. Instantly, a plate of freshly made fried fish flew into the air and landed steadily in front of Caddy Bree. Perhaps she had sensed the subtle atmosphere in the air, or perhaps she felt that the dragon would protect her. Either way, she temporarily let down her guard and grabbed a piece of golden fish and started munching on it. At some point, Gildan had silently stood behind the table, narrowing his eyes and staring at the assassin with a provocative gaze. It was obvious that he, who had just obtained the power of rage, was eager to wash away the humiliation he had suffered in their last confrontation. Unfortunately, Artemis Entreri didn't respond to this provocation. He tore the hard bread in his hand into small pieces and stuffed them into his mouth, asking without raising his head, "Who are you? Why do you want to see me? What is your purpose?" "Hee, there's no need to be so nervous. First of all, I can assure you that I have no enmity towards you. On the contrary, I hope to recruit you and have high hopes for you." Zhang Cheng sat across the table and began trying to make contact with the assassin. Perhaps he wasn't too adept at close combat, but he could tell from Entreri's tense muscles and posture that the assassin would draw his weapon at lightning speed and stab himself in the heart the moment he sensed the slightest abnormality. In such a narrow space, Artemis had absolute confidence in herself. Of course, he didn't know that Zhang Cheng wasn't the human he appeared to be. Instead, he was a black dragon with a massive body and sturdy scales. Even if the dagger was lucky enough to stab into the gaps between the scales, it would at most cause some superficial wounds before being devoured by the dragon's lethal flames. Be it a bandit or an assassin, none of them could pose much of a threat to a true dragon with their short weapons. After all, the size of the dragons determined that only heavy weapons such as spears, war hammers, crossbows, two-handed greatswords, and axes could really hurt them. The dragon slayers were usually either powerful spellcasters or strength-type warriors who wore heavy armor. "Recruit me?" Entreri raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had considered several possibilities before coming here, but none of them were recruitment. Chapter 443. "That's right. I know you're working for Bashar Pukin Portkaren, but that idiot obviously doesn't realize your true value as an ace assassin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent you here to track down a halfling who stole the pendant of charm. In my opinion, even 100 pendants can't compare to the great benefits you can bring." Zhang Cheng crossed his arms in front of his chest and gave a rather high evaluation of the man. In his eyes, the real purpose of an assassin like Artemis Entreri was to intimidate others. First, through a series of high-difficulty assassinations, propaganda, and hype, everyone in the surrounding area would feel a strong sense of awe and fear towards him. When everyone believed that Enchili's target would die as long as he struck, the person controlling him would then be able to use this invisible deterrence to control many things, such as information or some shady transactions. In this regard, the shadow thieves operating in the Amu area did a very good job. Every once in a while, they would set up a star or role model. On one hand, it was to intimidate their enemies, and on the other hand, it was to reassure their subordinates. After all, as long as the star was still standing, it meant that no matter how bad the situation was, the guild was still standing. But look at what the short-sighted Bashar Puk had done. He actually sent Artemis Entreri away from his base to hunt down the halfling Regis, just to take back the trash pendant that could barely affect the target with a weak will. The effect of the first circle spell, Friendly Spell, might even be better than this pendant. If it were another guild leader who was a little smarter, he would have used his excellent killing skills to start a war that would sweep across the entire underground world of Portkaren. Then, he would have continued to expand his territory and strength, and finally build a criminal network that covered the most densely populated city on the continent. But regrettably, Bashapukar was just a lowly nobody after all. He did not have the ambition to become a king, nor did he have a high vision. It wouldn't be long before he was overthrown by the big trouble he had caused, and he would become one of the guild leaders who disappeared in the long history of Port Karen. Without a doubt, Entreri saw the flames of madness and destruction in Bashar's eyes. After a full minute, he calmly asked, "If my answer is no, what will you do?" Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged. "I don't know how to do anything. In fact, I didn't expect to gain your loyalty the first time we met. Today, we've only interacted with each other to let you understand that I have such thoughts." Mere contact. Artemis Entreri frowned subconsciously. The reason was very simple. Among the many superiors he had come into contact with, no one would easily let go of someone who was unwilling to accept their good intentions, not to mention that he was currently in the other party's territory. Hee, please don't doubt my sincerity. You have to know that you are a very important part of my future plans. Well, let's call it a day. You don't have to make a decision right away. Oh, right, if you don't mind, I'll take this girl with me. With that, Zhang Cheng pulled Cadibri up and looked like he was about to turn and leave. "Let go. She belongs to me." But before the two of them could even take half a step, the killer's eyes emitted a terrifying cold light. He suddenly pulled out his dagger and stabbed out in a very strange posture. "Sorry, she belongs to me now." Zhang Cheng raised a finger without turning his head and chanted a short and jerky incantation in a low voice. Instantly, balls of light, completely composed of energy, shot out from between his fingers. Bang, 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 bang. Following a series of loud bangs, Artemis Entreri had no choice but to give up his attack. He kicked over the table and rolled back to avoid the energy bullets. Obviously, this spell was a combination of Farron Continent's native arcane spell, Magic Missile, and Azeroth's arcane missile, which was commonly used by Azeroth's mages. Not only did it increase the number of energy missiles that could be released, but its power was also comparable to that of a large-caliber shotgun. The hardwood table, which was strong enough to withstand the attack of a normal sword, was smashed into pieces the moment it collided with the energy bullets. The floor was full of holes the size of a grown man's fist. Gildan, Sini, teach him a lesson. Also, make him realize who he is. Remember, don't accidentally cripple him. After saying this, Zhang Cheng did not give the killer a second chance to attack. He pushed open the door and disappeared into the night. Needless to say, he did not like Entreri's arrogance and conceit. To be more precise, he needed an obedient pawn, a sharp blade hidden in the shadows, not someone who thought too highly of himself. This would slowly change after Entreri met Drizzt. All he needed to do was wait patiently. Hee, as you wish, my lord. Gildan, thirsting for revenge, pulled out his long sword and charged forward with a speed that exceeded the limits of his physical body. Boom! With a single strike, he shattered the chair that the killer had thrown at him. Along with the strong emotional fluctuations, this veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles felt a powerful force flowing through his veins. Regardless of whether it was strength, agility, or speed, they had all been greatly enhanced. Although it lasted for a short time, it was undoubtedly a power he had never heard of before. It came from a mysterious potion. How is this possible? Entreri's pupils shrank as he witnessed this inconceivable scene. He nimbly dodged the near-fatal strike. As far as he could remember, other than power-type monsters like the ogres, there weren't many humans who could split a hardwood chair with a longsword. This was especially true when the two of them had fought not too long ago. At that time, the opponent's strength was not as exaggerated as it was now. How is it? Are you surprised? Don't worry, the show has just begun. I'll return all the humiliation you've suffered. Gildan taunted as he pushed away the customers who were running outside, a delighted smile on his face. A few hours ago, the killer had put a sharp blade to his neck, unscrupulously threatening his life. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wanted to take it back with interest. Don't forget Master's orders. He can't be crippled, and he can't die. Sydney, who had been silent all this time, suddenly reminded. Understood. I don't intend to kill him. I just want to give him a good beating." With that last word, Gildan once again burst forth with twice his usual strength and speed. He allowed the sharp dagger to pierce his shoulder as he raised his right fist and smashed it into his opponent's face. Just as Entreri was about to dodge the punch, he suddenly felt himself stepping on a puddle of water and lost his balance. The next second, bang. Chapter 444. "What are you going to do to me?" Caddy Bree couldn't help but stop and ask loudly. She was not an idiot. She had already understood from the conversation that this terrifying black dragon was not as kind as he had shown in the Battle of Icewind Valley. Instead, he had a terrifying plan and conspiracy. Seeing the intense vigilance in the girl's eyes, Zhang Cheng shrugged with a smile. "Nothing much. You're free. You can choose to stay and accept my protection, or turn around and leave alone to face the hungry hoodlums and villains hiding in the alleyways. But for safety reasons, I suggest you choose the former. After all, for a young and beautiful lady, being pressed to the ground by a dozen or even dozens of men was not something to be happy about. Of course, if you have any special hobbies, just pretend I didn't say anything." "Bah, you're shameless." Caddy Bree spat fiercely, her face red. Although she was still a girl who had never had intimate contact with a man, she still understood the hint in his words. Perhaps in other towns, she could ignore this kind of mocking threat, but in the notorious Luskan, it could definitely become a reality. In fact, even for the soldiers in charge of the security and defense of Luskan, the dock area was a dangerous place. Every morning, several naked corpses would be found here. All the clothes and valuables on the corpses would be taken away. If the corpses were women, there would be traces of being violated. It was said that the great commander appointed by the Arcane Brotherhood to manage this area would even personally escort these dirty activities. Therefore, deceit, murder, robbery, rape, human trafficking, and other behaviors that were seen as symbols of evil and chaos were nothing in Luskan. As long as the people in power were treated well, there was no need to worry about being arrested at all. Shameless? Don't forget, it was I who saved you from the enemy. Think about it. If it wasn't for me, what would have happened if Entreri caught up with your foster father and friends? He would have used your life as a hostage without hesitation. At that time, there might have been people who would have died because of you. I was the one who stopped all this from happening. Zhang Cheng glanced at the girl meaningfully. What is your goal? I can feel that you've been secretly plotting something ever since the Battle of Icewind Valley. From helping Drizzt defeat Axel Thursday to betraying Akar Kaiser, you've been there at every crucial point. Caddy Bree retorted, not showing any weakness. It had to be said that as one of the few members of the Mithril 5 adventurer team who had some brains, she had clearly grasped some crucial parts. What, should I not help Drizzt? Should I watch him be killed by the Baylor? Or should I not have betrayed Akar Castle? Should I have integrated the monster army after his death to directly attack the 10 towns and establish my own rule with terror and violence? Zhang Cheng asked with a playful expression. Caddy Bree quickly shook her head. No, that's not. You just say, I'm to hell to a dragon's therefore. No matter what he was doing, he must be plotting some terrifying scheme in the dark. Look, what a laughable suspicion. Just because of my race, I'm being doubted for no reason. Could it be that after living with Drizzt for so many years, you still haven't learned to judge good and evil based on actions and not race and skin color? Zhang Cheng pretended to be indignant as he roared. Of course, he was taking advantage of the fact that she didn't know any spells. Otherwise, a simple detect good or detect evil would immediately reveal the crimson magical light that symbolized extreme evil on his body. I'm sorry. The girl clearly hadn't experienced being criticized by someone who stood on the moral high ground. She subconsciously lowered her head and showed an expression of guilt. Forget it. I'm used to it anyway. Let's go. I'll send you to Silvery Moon at daybreak tomorrow. Your foster father and friends must pass through there in this adventure. It should be safe for you to wait for them there. After harshly teasing Caddy Bree, Zhang Cheng quickly gave her a compromise that she could accept. No matter what, Mithril Hall was still rather attractive to him. Be it the vast amount of Mithril or the thousands of gray dwarf tribes, They were all things that he had to obtain. As for that pitiful black dragon flicker, he would save it as a servant if it was convenient. If not, he would collect its corpse and use it to create all sorts of powerful magical items. Really? Send me to Silvery Moon. Caddy Bree's mouth was agape in shock. She had thought that she might be imprisoned or used as a bargaining chip, but she had never dreamed that he would let her go so easily. Moreover, he would send her to her closest kin and companions. Of course. So hurry up and follow me back to the tower to take a bath and change into clean clothes. Have a good night's rest, and we'll leave at daybreak tomorrow. Having said that, Zhangqing no longer paid any attention to this inexperienced girl. He pulled his hood tightly over his face to prevent the flames flickering in his eyes from being discovered. The reason he'd chosen to leave Luskan at this time had nothing to do with Caddy Bree's arrival. It was just an excuse, a shield to hide his true intentions. His real goal was to let the other 3 Tower Masters act freely and quickly launch an attack on Arkham Gris. If the founder and leader of the Arcane Brotherhood died, or went missing due to serious injuries, the whole of Luskan would fall into chaos. When that happened, not only would he be able to hide in the dark and make use of the spreading chaos to eradicate the strongholds of the Harpist Alliance one by one, he would also be able to extend his influence into the army, the Pirate Alliance, and the administrative system. However, if he didn't leave, the other 3 Tower Masters would secretly conserve their strength when planning the attack on Arkham Gris, guarding against a sudden enemy like him. If the assassination failed, it would undoubtedly affect many of their subsequent plans. However, Caddy Bree was completely unaware of the power struggle within the Arcane Brotherhood. She happily took a bath and changed into a sleek silk robe. Then, she lay on the soft bed and fell into a deep sleep. She had no idea what was going to happen next would have a huge impact on the Faron continent, especially the complicated situation in the north. At the same time, in a tavern near the docks, Gildan was carrying the beaten-up Artemis Entreri to a hillside not far from the city. He tossed Artemis Entreri onto the ground and sneered, "Consider yourself lucky. Just lie here for the night. Tomorrow morning, the Lord will personally bring you to your target." The assassin stared at the other party with his eyes wide open, not saying a word. Chapter 445. Early in the morning the next day, all the residents of Luskan saw a gigantic black dragon rise into the sky and slowly disappear into the distant east. Even though most people did not know why a black dragon would appear in the outskirts of the city, the higher-ups of the Arcane Brotherhood, who had been planning an assassination and rebellion, all heaved a sigh of relief. After so many days of spying, the masterminds, led by Delta Gel Zelinda, had long figured out that the young man living in the North Tower was not a human at all. Instead, he was a ferocious and terrifying dragon. Thus, they had been secretly on high alert, afraid that the other party would secretly make a big move. But now, after seeing the dragon leave with their own eyes, everyone was relieved. They put all their energy into the grand plan of assassinating Ikhilam Gris and robbing him of the broken magic crystals. Of course, in order not to excessively provoke Zhang Cheng, they did not extend their hands into the North Tower. They even deliberately allowed the North Tower to make some small moves, such as letting Gildan become the highest commander of the 200 soldiers at the North Gate. No one knew that while the internal power struggle within the Arcane Brotherhood was at its climax, a mysterious man on the sea had already united dozens of warships, forming the largest pirate fleet in the northern region of Deepwater City. Under his powerful leadership, the pirates had just defeated the defensive navy of the city of Neverwinter. Then, they landed and plundered the rich port area. Loaded with endless wealth and goods, they embarked on the journey back home in a grandiose manner. "Lord Ian, drink some honey wine. We'll be back in Luskan in half a day at most. I believe that with this glorious victory, even those old fellows will look at you in a new light. You might even gain the favor of the Magi and become the next great commander." A young pirate had a look of admiration on his face as he handed over a bottle of hard liquor that had been smashed into a low-quality green glass bottle. "Huh, silly boy. Don't think so much. Just go and clean the deck." Ian took the bottle and raised his head to take a gulp, pretending to be forthright as he laughed out loud. In fact, the reason why he could so quickly subdue so many rebellious pirates was all because of Zhang Cheng's plan. After all, Deepwater City and Neverwinter were the only two cities that posed a threat to Luskin out of the many ports along the northern coast. The former was too powerful and could not act rashly for the time being. Therefore, Luskin had always regarded the city of Neverwinter, which was closest to him, as an enemy that he had to defeat. The pirates who used Luskin as their home port continued to plunder merchant ships flying the city of Neverwinter flag.
Therefore, when Ian invited them to plunder the rich harbor of Neverwinter, every pirate captain in the surrounding area went into a state of hysteria. In addition, he had premeditated to let a small group of pirates approach Neverwinter and lure the Navy defending the port to the Whalebone Islands to set up a beautiful ambush, completely annihilating and disintegrating the enemy's last naval defense. Then, with the help of these captive warships, they directly sent a large number of pirates ashore and launched an attack on the defenseless port area. In just a short day, this once bustling area was completely turned into a sea of fire. Although under Ian's control, the pirates did not wantonly slaughter civilians, rape women, or rob people. They took away all the valuable things in the area. Before they left, they even set fire to the area, completely destroying the decades of business and reputation that Neverwinter had painstakingly built. It was estimated that for a long time, merchants would not invest in this city, which was known as the Pearl of the Northern Kingdoms, due to their lack of security. Obviously, a city of Neverwinter that lacked trade was what Zhang Cheng wanted to see. In his plan, there should not be a second city around Luskin that could compete with it. Moreover, the two cities were so close to each other. Unless one city fell, the other city would not be able to grow. Of course, in addition to this, Ian also used a successful plunder to establish a great reputation among the pirates, and even vaguely had the intention of establishing a ruling position in the northern seas. Despite Luskin's reputation as a city of 1,000 sails in reality, there were not many pirate ships under control of the Arcane Brotherhood. There were only about 200 ships, and dozens of them were close to 1/6 of the total. It was enough to play a decisive role at a critical moment. Boss, we sincerely wish you a long life and become the new king. Become the new pirate king. Another slightly drunk sailor raised his glass and shouted, "That's right. Our captain is the best. To the future pirate king. To the future pirate king. Cheers!" For a moment, the entire crew on the flagship seemed to be infected by some kind of emotion. They excitedly shouted the title that they had dreamed of in their entire lives. Haha, what a bunch of hot-blooded people. Ian subconsciously touched the two-handed greatsword on his back, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a playful smile. He finally understood why his master had let him control these pirates, who were as annoying as vermin in the eyes of many people. It was because as long as he controlled this force, he would be able to control the trade worth millions or even tens of millions of gold coins on the entire west coast of Farron Continent.
Perhaps the pirates themselves were not strong, but no country or organization could resist the harassment and sieges of countless pirates day and night. Deepwater City, Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter, Scottera, Cairn Port, one after another, densely populated cities were scattered across the western coast of the continent like stars in the sky. The reason why they were more prosperous than other places, aside from geographical factors, was because of the prosperous maritime trade. If the maritime trade of any city was cut off, it would be equivalent to a human being who was stuck in his esophagus. It would not take long for it to slowly become thin and weak. Feeling the huge hidden power behind him, Ian clenched his fists tightly and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. Become the Pirate King? Sounds good. Instantly, his eyes turned into the vertical pupils of a beast, shooting out a light called ambition. In fact, after obtaining a longer life, he had once lost his goal in life. He did not know what he should do next, and subconsciously obeyed the orders given by his master. But now, the desire sleeping in the bottom of his heart had finally awakened. He began to crave money, power, fame, Beautiful women, perhaps it was because of the hard life in Icewind Valley for too long, or perhaps it was because of the dragon's blood in the potion, but after tasting the wonderful taste of power, Ian set a goal for his life. Chapter 446. Leaving Luskan, Zhang Cheng headed east along the Mirar River, passing through the hidden forest and the eternal wasteland. He finally landed on a small road about 10 kilometers away from Silvery Moon City before the sky turned dark. The reason he chose to land here was not because he was tired or unable to fly, but because he did not want to attract the attention of the magic towers in Silvery Moon City. After all, Silvery Moon City was not a small place like Ten Towns, Neverwinter, or Baldur's Gate that lacked magical defenses. On the contrary, it had a large number of spellcasters that was comparable to Deepwater City. It even had a Lustrial Silverhand, the chosen of the goddess of magic, personally overseeing it. This immortal, sleepless, and sickly woman was born in the year 762 of the Valley calendar. She was now 1356, close to 600 years old. What did 600 years of sleepless nights mean to a spellcaster? It meant that she had more time to study and research than most wizards in this world. It meant that she could learn almost all spells, even legendary spells that had broken the restrictions of the weave and could only be used by a handful of top spellcasters. Coupled with the powerful strength bestowed upon her by the goddess of magic, even the average legendary spellcaster was no match for a Lustrial Silverhand. Fortunately, a Lustrial Silverhand did not spend the entire 600 years studying and researching magic. Instead, she was passionate about fulfilling her naive political ambitions, working tirelessly to build a city where all races could coexist peacefully. Over time, she gradually forgot that she was a powerful wizard and became more and more like a lord and politician. It was ironic that Silvery Moon City did not have all races coexisting peacefully like she had originally designed. At the very least, the evil orcs, giants, dark elves, mind flayers, ogres, goblins, ogres, and war creatures were not allowed to cross the city gates. In the eyes of many kind people, Lustrial Silverhand was a great leader through and through. She was fair and selfless, never refusing anyone's request for help, and would even spare the little free time she had to rescue travelers in danger in the wild. However, in Zhang Cheng's eyes, all these actions made her seem like a giant baby that had not grown up, completely immersed in her own illusory world and unable to extricate herself. 600 years. Humans on Earth used 600 years to complete the great geographical discovery, the Renaissance, the two industrial revolutions, and the World War. They completed a series of great works that included economic, military, and political theories. They even created nuclear energy, jet engines, manned spaceships, the internet, genetic technology, biomedical technology, and so on. But Lustrial Silverhand, how the residents of Silver Moon City lived hundreds of years ago, was still the same. Other than having a larger population, a larger city, and more wizard towers, nothing else had changed. Farmers still relied on livestock to work the fields. Their mode of transportation was still the outdated horse carriages. Even the road 1 kilometer away from Silver Moon City was a muddy dirt road. To put it nicely, it was a steady development. To put it bluntly, it was no progress at all. Zhang Cheng believed that if he was given 600 years, no, he would not be disturbed for 100 years. He could definitely create a glorious magic civilization that surpassed the Netheril Empire and the Amaska Empire. What are you thinking about? Catti Bree, who had just climbed down from the dragon's back, asked as she stared into the dark dragon's burning eyes. No, it's nothing. I'm just imagining things. Zhang Cheng shook his head and chased the messy thoughts out of his mind. He quickly used the innate ability of dragons to transform into human form. He didn't know why, but all sorts of crazy thoughts had been popping up in his head from time to time. For example, he'd had an inexplicable impulse a few minutes ago to directly fly over Silver Moon City and spray scorching flames down, engulfing the beautiful city in a sea of fire. Catti Bree obviously did not know that she'd almost brought destruction and terror to a beautiful city. She urged him with a relaxed expression. Let's go quickly. I heard from Bruno a long time ago that Silvermoon City is the most beautiful and hospitable place in the north. There's delicious food, poets who sing heroic songs, and especially the respected lady, Illustrial. Oh, you sound like you admire her a lot? A mocking smile appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. At the same time, he glanced at the place he'd just landed from the corner of his eye. Of course. Don't you think she's an outstanding ruler? Caddy Bree was obviously a die-hard fan of Illustrial. She turned around and rolled her eyes in annoyance. I'm sorry, but I don't think she's outstanding at all. On the contrary, I think she's completely wasted hundreds of years of her reign. She hasn't solved a single fundamental problem. Zhang Cheng didn't hide his disdain for Illustrial's ruling ability at all. What do you mean? Do you think you can do better than Lady Hope? Caddy Bree glared angrily. That's right. Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. Just as the two of them glared at each other and were about to start arguing, a woman wearing a jewel-studded golden crown and a white silk robe appeared out of thin air not far away. She smiled and asked, Hello, strong dragon. Can you tell me what you would do if you were the ruler of Silvermoon City? Illustrial Silverhand. Sensing the surging magical energy within her body, Zhang Cheng's pupils contracted violently. That's right, it's me. Don't be nervous. I didn't come here to fight. I just happened to hear an interesting topic. The woman stroked her long silver hair, her eyes shining with the light of wisdom that had been baptized by time. Good day, Lady Hope. It's an honor to meet you. Caddy Bree hurriedly bowed, her face red with excitement. Good day, lively and kind girl. I know you. You're the adopted daughter of the Warhammer tribe's dwarven king, Bruno. Your adoptive father and friends are on their way to Silvermoon City. You'll be reunited with them soon. Illustrial waved at the girl as she spoke. The latter didn't hesitate at all, immediately abandoning her original protector to seek refuge under Illustrial's protection. Zhang Cheng watched all of this happen with great interest. He had no intention of stopping it all. Chapter 447. What will I do? The first thing I'll do is remove the powerful magical defenses that cover Silvery Moon, and let every citizen face the threats of orcs, barbarians, goblins, ogres, and trolls. I'll then lead them to use blood and fire to build the soul of the city. Zhang Cheng looked straight into her eyes, giving his answer without hesitation. But many people will die. Illustrial frowned subconsciously. It was obvious that she didn't like such an iron-blooded way of ruling at all. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. No, this sacrifice is worth it. At the very least, the people will learn how to use their own strength to fight, to protect their own property and right to live. Look at what the citizens of Silvery Moon have become under your powerful protection. They're so weak that they can only think of asking you for help when they're ambushed by a small group of monsters. I don't deny the contributions you've made to this city, but I feel that you're overprotective. Competition and elimination are eternal laws of nature, and you're trying to use your power to eliminate them. The price you pay is turning the citizens into a flock of weak sheep. While you're alive, the enemies hiding in the shadows won't act rashly. But once you're missing or dead, guess what will happen to Silvery Moon? It will quickly decline under the fierce attacks of the enemy, and it might even be destroyed. The citizens living here will be enslaved by the purest, most barbaric violence. Because they've been protected for too long, they've lost the spirit and strength to resist. Although Silvermoon City has achieved peace and prosperity under your rule, this kind of peace and prosperity is weak, fake, and soulless. It is completely built on your powerful personal strength and prestige. Your people worship you and desire your selfless help and protection. But keep in mind that this world is very dangerous, so dangerous that even the high and mighty gods can fall. As a ruler, if you can't establish an administrative system that can continue to function after your death or resignation, you're not unqualified. In my opinion, you're a naive, childish ruler who's immersed in his own beautiful fantasies. Zhang Cheng didn't beat around the bush, directly destroying the hope that Illustrial had fought for her entire life. Without a doubt, all of this originated from the desire to destroy that filled his mind. After all, Destroying a city was far less satisfying than destroying someone's hope, especially when the person was the chosen of the goddess of magic, Illustrial Silverhand, known as the Lady of Hope. Illustrial clearly hadn't expected to hear such a clear and direct evaluation from an evil dragon. Her expression changed slightly as she retorted, "No, you're wrong. As long as there is still hope in people's hearts, Silver Moon City would never be destroyed. Perhaps my dream is indeed a little childish, but you haven't seen how many people have traveled thousands of miles to Silver Moon City because of this childish dream just to help me achieve it. Ha ha! So this is your excuse for not making any progress for hundreds of years and keeping Silver Moon City in its current state? Stop trying to explain yourself. You're not a qualified ruler at all. I don't even need a few hundred years. I'll be able to create a miracle that you'll never be able to achieve in 10 years at most." Zhang Cheng laughed mockingly. 10 years. Illustrial keenly grasped this key phrase. That's right. It won't be long before I take control of Luskan. You'll understand what I mean then. After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Cheng really did soar into the air, transforming into a huge black dragon that slowly disappeared into the clouds. Illustrial watched as he flew higher and higher until he finally became a black dot. She finally heaved a sigh of relief, squinting her eyes as she muttered to herself, "Unbelievable. I've never seen a dragon with such mature and rational thinking." As an old woman who had lived for close to 600 years, she had seen all sorts of dragons. Some were kind, some were evil, but most of them couldn't change their arrogance. Even when they entered the world of mortals, they still maintained a high and mighty attitude. How could they have such a deep understanding of politics? Although she wasn't willing to admit that there was anything wrong with Silver Moon City's current policies, the danger she just mentioned did exist. This was especially so with the news from the adventurers that the number of monsters in the wilderness seemed to be constantly increasing and seemed to be gathering. If she really was gone one day, the remaining spellcasters in Silver Moon City wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Perhaps it's time to unite the surrounding cities and form a stronger union. Illustrial's eyes shone with a strange light. She wasn't an idiot, nor was she an idiot. Her long years had allowed her to see through many things, and she was very clear about Silver Moon City's flaws. She'd long since formulated a series of plans to make up for them. The most important step was to unite all the important cities in the northern regions and form a unified union. As long as an alliance was formed, millions of kind-hearted people would be united with Silver Moon City at the center, enough to resist all kinds of threats. Of course, it wasn't easy to achieve this. Many cities and towns had conflicts of interest. That was why she'd spent hundreds of years building up her image as a righteous, selfless person who didn't ask for anything in return. She wanted to use this personal prestige to bridge the cracks between them. At the very least, when conflict arose, both sides could sit down at the table to resolve their differences instead of raising their weapons at each other. As Illustrial teleported away with Caddy Bree, Artemis Entreri, who'd been hiding behind a tree for half a day, finally walked out. This ace killer first glanced at the surrounding environment, then took a deep breath and said sarcastically, "Your way of recruiting me is really special. If you don't mind, can you tell me what happened to Sergeant Luskan? What's with his sudden burst of strength?" "You mean Gildan?" "It's nothing. I only used a potion to activate the magical energy hidden in his body. Trust me, if you drink something similar, you'll definitely be 100 times stronger than him." Zhang Cheng, who should have flown away in his dragon form, suddenly walked out from behind another tree. "Tell me, what are you trying to do?" Entreri's eyes were filled with deep fear. "I'm not sure. Do you know? My mind is filled with all sorts of things that would send most people into a frenzy. In order to not go completely insane, I have to find some things for myself to do. For example, controlling and transforming a city, or going head-to-head with those self-proclaimed kind-hearted bigwigs, destroying their so-called hope bit by bit. To use a line from a classic character, I'm like a dog chasing after a carriage. I don't really think about what I want to do or what I desire. But when I catch up, something interesting will happen. How about it? Do you want to join me? Let's have some fun together." Having said that, Zhang Cheng stretched out his right hand, an indescribable madness appearing on his pale face. Chapter 448. In the private room of the Arcane Brotherhood's East Tower Master, Delta Gel Zelinda was carefully enchanting a crossbow. His movements were so gentle that it was as if he was afraid that he would accidentally damage the hundreds of dense and exquisite patterns on it. This crossbow with more than 8 powerful spells was the kiss of death that he had carefully prepared for Akilam Gri. It was enough to instantly break through most of the protective spells and insert the poisonous arrowhead into the body of the opponent. No one knew better than him how careful and cautious the founder of the Arcane Brotherhood was, so there was only one chance. Once the assassination failed, it would mean a disaster for all the participants. Just as Delta Gel Zelinda finished chanting and enchanting the last spell, the closed door was suddenly pushed open. A man in a blue robe shouted excitedly, "He's out! He's out! What should we do now? Do we act immediately?" "He's out." Akilam Gri left the private room of the central spire. Delta Gel Zelinda's whole body trembled slightly, and his eyes shone with a strange light. "That's right. He looks very tired. He probably hasn't had a good rest for a long time. Maybe." A fierce and twisted expression appeared on the man's nervous face. "Inform everyone. Act immediately. Remember, don't let him escape. Cleanzinabin has the terrible power to convert sunlight into energy. Once he stands under the sun, he's almost invincible." Delta Gel made a prompt decision. Starting a rebellion from the bottom up was always a road of no return. Therefore, he could only succeed and not fail. Otherwise, he would face the endless pursuit of the entire Arcane Brotherhood. Understood. At the same time, in the public area of the central spire, Akilam Gri, who had just finished his physiological needs, was dragging his old and tired body to the stairs. He clenched the broken magic crystal tightly in his hand, and his mind was filled with thoughts of how he could prolong his life. Should he transform into an undead lich? Or should he use other powerful spells to occupy the body of a long-lived race, such as elves, elementals, or dragons? The most important reason why magic crystal shards were regarded as divine artifacts by many evil spellcasters was that they could use the energy converted from sunlight to create spells for the holder. When they were full of energy, they could continuously create 16 terrifying level 9 spells. What did 16 ninth circle spells mean? This meant that he could summon 16 Baylor demons that were as terrifying as Axel Thor from the bottomless abyss. This meant that he could cast powerful spells such as Time Stop, Confinement, Pop Explosion, and Banshee's Howl 16 times. In fact, the previous owner of the broken magic crystal, Akar Kai So, didn't even exert 1% of the power of this artifact. Otherwise, 10 towns would have become dust in history. But Akilam Gris was different. He was a powerful mage and knew many advanced spells. So naturally, with the help of the broken magic crystals, he had perfected several spells that he couldn't master before. Now that extending his lifespan was no longer a problem, the question was which method to choose. Which method would allow him to get through the dangerous period as quickly as possible and regain control of the chaotic tower. Just as the old mage was immersed in his happy worries, he didn't notice that his most trusted assistant had quietly come up behind him, raised a dagger that glowed with cold light, and stabbed down. Bang! As expected, before the sharp blade touched the wrinkled and aged skin, a protective spell was triggered instantly. For a moment, protective spells such as Stone Skin, Mage's Armor, protection from elemental damage, spell nullification barrier, and others quickly emerged one after another. The dazzling magical light illuminated the dim hall. "Damn it! What are you doing?" Akilam Gris turned around and roared in anger. He never dreamed that the person he trusted the most would betray him. "What am I doing? Of course, I'm going to take your life. Old man, you've been ruling the Arcane Brotherhood for too long. We all agree that it's time for a new leader." With that, the assassin's body quickly distorted and transformed into the appearance of another middle-aged man. He didn't intend to give the enemy too much time to breathe. He quickly took a few steps back and raised his right hand. "Go. Kill him. Quickly cast the spell." Don't give him time to chant the spell. The rebels who had been lying in ambush in the hall for many days tore off their disguises one after another. Some began to loudly chant powerful destructive spells, while others activated their wands or other magical items to shoot out dazzling offensive spells, drowning the old man alive. But unfortunately, after a round of indiscriminate bombardment, Aquilum Gris was not seriously injured as expected. On the contrary, he didn't even lose a single hair. Thanks to his powerful defensive magic, most of the offensive spells below the third circle were dispelled by an invisible force field when they were more than 10 meters away. That's the spell nullification barrier. You must use a spell above the fourth circle to break it. It was unknown who recognized the light ball-like cover, but that person quickly shouted out a warning. You all deserve to die. All of you deserve to die. Aquilum Gris was undoubtedly enraged by the sudden rebellion and assassination. His two eyes burst with anger, and he raised his staff and heavily poked the ground. A miserable scream that couldn't be described with words began to reverberate in the hall. 6 low-ranked wizards and apprentices who were relatively close heard this sound and instantly fell to the ground with ashen faces, breathing their last breaths. The rest of the people weren't any better. One after another, dark red blood spurted out from their mouths, noses, ears, and other body parts. Without a doubt, this was the famous ninth circle necromancy spell, Wail of the Banshee. With a mere spell, Aquilum Gris turned the situation around, making these wizards who tried to assassinate him pay a heavy price. The gap between a high-ranked wizard and a low-ranked wizard was like a chasm, vividly displayed at this moment. Tell me, which pagoda lord started this rebellion? Who are the participants? The old wizard stepped on the stomach of one of the wizards and questioned sternly. Without waiting for this unlucky guy to answer, a cold light suddenly appeared out of thin air, flying towards his chest at an extremely fast speed. Protective arrow. The staff in Aquilum Gris' hand suddenly emitted a bright light. The next second,